Chapter 451. Hua. The extremely loud sound of waves mixed with the faint cry of seagulls could be heard constantly reverberating on the golden beach under the setting sun, giving people a very dreamy feeling. This was the first scene that Noah saw when he opened his eyes after leaving the world of fairy tale, and chose to enter another world. Perhaps because it was dusk, there were not many people on the dreamy beach. There were only a few young men in swimsuits who were immersed in the beautiful beach world. Noah looked around and observed a group of people who were playing beach volleyball not far from him. It was a group of young men who looked like they were not from the East. Not only them, but the people on the beach were basically like this. One look and you could tell that they were not from the East. It seems that this is not China or Japan. Noah made a rough judgment. Well, it's also possible that it's a completely unrelated place. So far, the worlds that Noah had been to were Fairy Tale, Black Bullet, Absolute Dual Blades, and Night of the Magician. Among them, the Black Bullet, Absolute Dual Blades, and the Night of the Magicians all had their own differences, but without exception, they were all set in the modern world. The only exception was Fairy Tale. Therefore, Noah felt that if the world he had arrived in was set in the modern world, then the place he was now in was most likely a foreign country. Otherwise, it would be like the world of Fairy Tale, which was not set in the modern world. I hope it's the former. In the world of a Black Bullet, Noah used a short 1 year to learn all the languages in the world so that he would not run into a wall in other worlds because of language problems. If the world he was in now was also set in the modern world, then even if he came to a foreign country, Noah would not have to worry about the language barrier. On the contrary, Noah might encounter a language barrier and would have to worry about it for a long time. Anyway, let's find someone to ask first. With this thought in mind, Noah quickly caught a passerby. Can I ask you something? First of all, Noah used English. After all, the three modern worlds that he had descended upon in the past basically used English as the international language. Even during diplomacy, English was more often used. Therefore, since the place they landed in was similar to a foreign country, then if this world was also set in modern times, it would be more possible to communicate in English. However, the young man who was caught by Noah scratched his head in distress and uttered a sentence in his mind. Are they foreign tourists? Hearing this sentence, Noah's heart immediately relaxed. Although it wasn't English, it was Italian. Noah had learned all the languages of the modern world. Naturally, Italian was one of them. At that moment, Noah switched to Italian and spoke fluently to the young man. I'm sorry, I am indeed a foreign tourist, but I'm lost now. Can I ask you something? Hearing Noah use extremely fluent Italian, the young man was surprised, but at the same time, his expression couldn't help but show a trace of relief. If there was a language barrier, it was indeed very difficult to communicate. This was true for both parties who needed to communicate. If it were a more indifferent person, he would wave his hand and drive people away when he encountered a person who didn't speak the language barrier, or simply leave the person behind. But this young man didn't seem to be that kind of person, and he was quite enthusiastic. So, Noah got the information he needed through some inquiries. As Noah thought, this world was set in the modern world, but it was not China or Japan, but Italy. Noah more or less guessed this from the young man using Italian. Noah was now at the southern end of Italy, a resort island floating on the Mediterranean Sea, Sardinia. This was a resort island with a population of only about 10,000 people. It was surrounded by clear seawater, and the surrounding natural environment was also very beautiful. Naturally, the biggest industry of such a resort island was sightseeing. Whenever summer came, Sardinia would be flooded with tourists with the purpose of going to Europe for vacation, especially the coast in the northeast, which was a special resort for noble people. Sardinia and the surrounding islands formed the autonomous prefecture of Sardinia, and the capital, Cagliari, was a port in the south of the island. Now, Noah was on the beach not far from Cagliari. In addition, he used English at the beginning, so the young man thought that Noah was a foreign tourist. After getting the information that he wanted, Noah expressed his gratitude to the young man who had accompanied him for a long time. In return, he received a smile from the young man that was definitely not a hypocritical one. After bidding farewell to each other, Noah saw the young man off. It's said that Italians are more enthusiastic. I thought only women were like this, but I didn't expect men to be the same. I just don't know if they are bold or not. With this sentence as an inspiration, Noah raised his head and looked at the road to colliery that the young man pointed out to him. I just don't know if this world is as ordinary as it looks on the surface. In the world of The Dark Bullet, there were cursed children, protogut animals, and even new human creation project, mechanical soldiers like Rentaro and Leech Kajian. In the world of Absolute Dual Blade, there were surpassers, Godslayer, and other individuals with power beyond human beings. As for the Night of Sorcerers, in addition to magicians, there were all kinds of other existences. It was not as peaceful as it looked on the surface. Was this world the same? This was Noah's question. However, if this was the case, it was more in line with Noah's intentions. After all, in addition to looking for world fragments, Noah also had to find a way to strengthen himself. If this was an ordinary world, then Noah would not be able to achieve his second goal. In any case, it's getting dark. Let's go to the city and find a hotel to rest first. Because of Gaia and Alea's call, Noah left the world of fairy tale and went to Between Worlds. As a result, when he returned, he mysteriously disappeared for a month. After that, Noah accompanied his two fiancées, Mira and Lisanna, for a whole week. After a week, he used work as an excuse to accept a mission that would take a long time. He did his best to solve it in 3 days before returning to this world. This way, when Noah returned to the world of fairy tale, even if a month had passed, Noah could use the excuse of, "It took more time than expected," as an excuse. When he left the world of fairy tale, it was already night time, and Noah was already a little sleepy. As for the problem of identity, well, let's talk about it tomorrow. Leaving this sentence, Noah walked in the direction of the city. At this time, Noah did not know. In a cold drink shop that sold ice cream in the distance, a handsome blonde man wearing a shirt and shorts, holding a cup of ice cream in his hand, who looked like he was on vacation, was gazing at Noah's back that was gradually disappearing into the distance with sparkling eyes that almost made people wonder if they would shine. Beside him, a man wearing glasses was looking at the blonde man with an expression of disgust and disgust. However, when he saw the blonde man's expression, he immediately frowned and said in a strange tone that could not be said to be respectful or rude. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." The blonde man casually replied and walked in the direction he was looking at. "You idiot." The man wearing glasses hurriedly chased after him and swallowed the last word he wanted to say with difficulty. "What do you want now?" Hearing this, the blonde man laughed heartily. "Nothing, I just saw an interesting person and wanted to say hello." Chapter 452. Noah arrived at Cagliari smoothly and entered the crowded streets. Since this world was set in the modern world, then if he walked along the main road, he would at least meet people in the end, so he would not be completely lost. In addition, Noah also met some passers-by on the way. Under the enthusiastic guidance of the other party, it was naturally impossible for him to not find the city. Undoubtedly, even if it was the capital of Sardinia, Cagliari was just a port. It was not that big, but surprisingly, there were many people here, and even many foreigners. That was natural. After all, this was a holiday island. Amidst the noise on the streets, Noah kept walking towards the city center. However, before he could walk far, Noah's footsteps came to a halt. In Noah's superb perception ability, Noah clearly felt an extremely unusual aura. It was the aura of a person. Moreover, it was very obvious that it was not the aura of an ordinary person. Because an ordinary person could not have such an aura that was like an unsheathed sword, extremely sharp, and made Noah's heart tighten. That was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the owner of this aura seemed to be coming in the direction of Noah, and he even extended his hand to Noah. If the other party wanted to harm Noah, then Noah would instantly feel the existence of killing intent, hostility, or malice, but Noah did not feel any of that. Therefore, the other party's hand that was extended towards Noah should be intending to put his hand on Noah's shoulder, right? However, because the other party's aura was too unusual, even if there was no killing intent, malice, or hostility, Noah still stopped in his tracks, and his body dodged like a reflex launch. The person who was about to put his hand on Noah's shoulder missed. Oh. The other party didn't seem to have expected Noah to dodge all of a sudden, or rather, he didn't expect Noah to notice his approach and avoid his attack with extreme sensitivity. He revealed a surprised expression, but soon, that surprised expression turned into one of interest. Only then did Noah use the momentum of dodging to turn around and look behind him, taking in the full view of the person behind him. What he saw was a young man with blonde hair. He was about 20 years old, only 5 years older than Noah. The young man was carrying a long box on his shoulder. The shape of the box looked like it was used to hold a baseball bat or a bamboo sword. Intuition told Noah that the thing in the box could not be ignored. Driven by such intuition, Noah immediately stared at the box on one side of the young man's shoulder and did not move his gaze away. Did you notice it too? The young man's surprised expression appeared again, and it was much more intense than before, but in the next second, it turned into an even more interested expression. Like me, did you notice that sword on me too? Sword? The word stunned Noah for a moment. Sword? Could it be that the box on the young man's shoulder contained a sword? If that was the case, then Noah could be sure of it. First of all, the person in front of him was definitely not an ordinary person. Would an ordinary person carry a sword? Secondly, this world was definitely not as peaceful as it seemed. Otherwise, a random person with a sword would not have come to Noah like this. This made Noah frown slightly, and he looked straight at the young man with a bright smile. Who are you? Speaking of which, I haven't introduced myself yet, but that's too troublesome, you can just call me Tony. The young man said so. Your name? Forget it, that kind of thing is not important. For a moment, Noah really wanted to yell at the young man's face, that kind of thing is not important. But in the end, he resisted the urge. The young man in front of him was definitely not an ordinary person. Because an ordinary person would not say something so stupid. Since my name is not important, why are you looking for me? Noah glanced at Tony. Or are you just asking for directions? No, didn't I just say that I noticed your sword? Tony laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes, only a glint that made Noah's heart skip a beat. Although it's a little strange to say this, I'm a person who is obsessed with swords. I can feel that you have a sword that cannot be ignored, and my intuition tells me that a fight with you would be very interesting. The words of the young man in front of him were a little inexplicable, but Noah was still able to understand the last sentence he said. Noah couldn't help but smile, but there was no emotion in his smile at all. In other words, you're here to pick a fight, right? How about a fight with me? Ignoring Noah's words and Noah's dangerous expression, Tony spoke as if there was no one around. Although I don't feel the aura of my kind from you, this is the first time I've met someone who can make me excited in an instant. Obviously, even those great knights and holy knights who have practiced swordsmanship for dozens or even hundreds of years can't give me this kind of feeling. You, an ordinary person, can actually do it. This really makes me very interested. Not to mention, you also have the aura of a sword that is inconceivable enough to be on par with mine. Tony's lips curled up as he finished speaking. His expression was like that of a brave warrior who was about to enter the battlefield and immersed in the battle with the enemy. How about it? Do you want to have a fight with me? At this moment, all the sounds in the surroundings seemed to have left Noah and Tony. The two of them stared at each other with a gaze that could make ordinary people faint. Noah didn't know what a grand knight, holy knight, or my kind meant. However, Noah felt that the sword Tony was referring to wasn't an actual sword, but Noah's swordsmanship. In other words, Tony felt that Noah's swordsmanship wasn't inferior to his, which was why he came looking for him. To be honest, Noah was almost the same as Tony. He could feel Tony's extraordinary sword skill attainments. However, at the same time, Noah felt that there was an even more terrifying power in Tony's body. That kind of power was no weaker than the feeling Noah got from Hades's eye that was covered by the blindfold. Not only was Tony not a simple character, but he was also very likely a very terrifying character. Noah realized this. However, even if Tony was a character who could rival Hades, Noah wouldn't be afraid of him. In fact, Noah was interested in meeting such an unfathomable character as soon as he arrived in this world. Perhaps he could obtain some important information about this world from this person. Noah was about to say something when an exasperated voice sounded from behind Tony. Salvatore Doni. What trouble are you trying to stir up this time? Following such an exasperated voice, a bespectacled man squeezed through the crowd and ran over here. His face was full of anger and anxiety, just like a beast tamer who had just released a lion. His appearance could be described as anxious to the point of jumping up and down. When this person appeared, Tony's expression crumbled. He had an obvious "oh no, I forgot about this guy" expression. Yo. Andre. My friend. Long time no see. Compared to long time no see, I'd rather never see you again, you idiot. You were the one who shook me off just now, right? Andre yelled at Donnie in a tired and furious tone. I understand, Salvatore Tony. As long as you're out of my sight, you'll do something that will plunge the entire world into chaos. How can you be called a king? Hey, Andre, calm down first. Look at the sky, look at the sunset, look at this beautiful city. Don't you feel happy? Tony smiled brightly. I'm sure you can understand my feelings. I can't help but want to find someone to fight when I see this. I don't understand. Andre was going crazy. Speaking of which, why does this have anything to do with fighting? Looking at the two of them, Noah fell into a state of speechlessness. What's wrong with this world? Chapter 453. Andre, my friend, I think you should have a glass of beer and think about what I'm saying. There's no need to think about what you're saying. Anyway, it's going to lead to big trouble. Even if you tell me that you're getting married, I'll believe that you're not making a lifelong vow with your other half. Instead, you're going to fight another time, right? How? How is that possible? Before you say that, please look into my eyes. Don't look away. Perhaps Tony and Andre didn't notice that the pedestrians around them had more or less distanced themselves from them and were whispering to each other while pointing at them. Noah's interest in Tony vanished as he looked at the two men who seemed to be having a crosstalk. He turned to Andre as though he was discouraged. Noah sensed a familiar power from Andre. Mana. It's a powerful mana that's comparable to Alusha's. It's been less than an hour since I came to this world. First, there's an unfathomable man who popped out of nowhere. Now, there's an existence that's comparable to Alusha's? Could it be that this world is filled with such existences? Noah couldn't figure it out. Seeing that Tony and Andre weren't going to stop arguing, he gave up on getting any information from them. Instead of being entangled with these two inexplicable people, it was better to hurry up and leave, so as to avoid any unnecessary trouble. This thought formed in Noah's mind. This meant that if he continued to stay with them, it would definitely lead to trouble. Noah instinctively felt that he had to leave. At that moment, Noah turned around and began to run without hesitation. Hey! Wait! Tony, who was quarreling with Andre, noticed Noah running away. His eyes widened as he hurriedly chased after him. You haven't decided if you want to fight with me. What? You want to fight with an ordinary person? Andre's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. I thought that you would only bring trouble to the people around you when you're causing trouble. At least, you wouldn't challenge them to a duel. Now, I know that I was wrong about you. Don't run, you idiot. Andre was on the verge of tears as he chased after Rode in exhaustion. The three men chased each other in a straight line. They were like cats on the crowded street, nimbly squeezing through the gaps in the sea of people. They whizzed through the crowd at a speed not inferior to an off-road bicycle at full speed. This scene shocked Andre, who was at the back of the group. Andre didn't doubt that Tony was capable of that. However, that young man was capable as well? Could it be that he's not an ordinary person, but a knight or a magician? Andre pondered. That's not right. How could the other party be just an ordinary knight or magician if he could make that idiot go through all this trouble? Could it be that he is also a king? Andre's expression immediately became interesting. Instead of saying that it was rosy, it was more accurate to say that it was deathly pale or deathly green. Not good. Let the two kings fight here. We're in big trouble. Andre finally got serious, mana slowly gushing out of his body. At this time, Andre was using a power called magic. It was unknown what kind of magic he used to enhance his speed, but Andre's speed suddenly increased. His figure flashed left and right like the wind as he passed through the crowd and chased after the two in front of him. Compared to Andre, Tony was anxious. Tony's outstanding eyesight prevented him from letting Noah out of his sight. Besides, Noah's astonishing speed and agility allowed him to pass through the crowd and enter the alley. How could Tony not be anxious? I won't let you escape. Oh, hi. With such a roar, Tony actually leaped higher than the sea of people and stepped on the head of the person in front of him without any hesitation as he leaped forward. In an instant, blood-curdling screams sounded one after another. Those were the screams of the people who were trampled to the ground by Tony's feet. It was apparent that Tony didn't have any skills to divert his strength. Or rather, he didn't even consider the people he stepped on. He only cared about his own goal. He laughed heartily as he leaped forward like a child crossing a river by stepping on a stone pier. Noah, who happened to turn around and saw this scene, almost jumped in fright. There's actually such an idiot in this world? Andre, who was running at the back, roared with grief and indignation when he saw Tony jumping forward by stepping on people's heads like a monkey and those who were lying on the ground screaming miserably under his feet, causing the entire street to be in chaos. You idiot! This was simply a walking, humanoid troublemaker. When Noah realized this, he dashed into an alley like a madman. However, at this moment, Tony, who was stepping on the head of the wailing man, also jumped into the alley. Tony stomped on the walls on both sides of the alley. His body turned into a blur as he leaped over Noah's head and landed in front of him. Haha! You can't escape. In response to Tony's maniacal laughter, Noah only replied with a single sentence. Too naive. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah sped up. Tony, who had not yet landed on the ground, was stunned. Noah spun around and kicked Tony's lower abdomen fiercely. Bang! Amidst the muffled sound, Noah did not kick Tony's lower abdomen. Instead, it was the box that had fallen into Tony's hands and was held in front of his abdomen. Tony, who was holding the box and blocking Noah's kick, was sent flying backward by Noah's force. At the same time, an excited expression appeared on his face. You're finally going to fight me? As he spoke, Tony raised his eyes and looked ahead. He was immediately stunned. Noah was nowhere to be seen. Tony hurriedly raised his head and looked up. Just like Tony, Noah stepped on the left and right sides of the alley wall and leaped up agilely. Not long after, he jumped onto the roof of the nearby building and disappeared. Tony's expression changed at first, but then a sinister smile appeared on his face. That was a sign that his fighting spirit had been completely aroused. Interesting. Leaving these words behind, Tony also jumped up onto the roof and chased after him. At this moment, Andre finally caught up. He was just in time to see Tony jumping onto the roof of the building with a twisted expression on his face. You just stepped on someone. Now you're stepping on someone else's roof. You trash should be arrested for trespassing. While shouting, Andre also used a magic spell called Leap. His body soared into the sky, and with a single leap, he landed on the roof of the building. If Tony heard Andre's words, he would cry out that he was wronged. Stepping on people was his fault, but jumping onto other people's roofs was Noah's idea. Whoosh! Amidst the whistling of the wind, Noah's figure flashed through the space. He jumped down from a building, jumped onto a magnificent building, and landed on the roof of the building. This was a cathedral on Sardinia. At this time, Noah was on the roof of such a large church. At the same time, a frivolous voice sounded in front of Noah. It's time to give up running, right? Friend. The one who said this was Donnie, who had also landed on the roof of the church. I thought you would be tired after jumping and running for so long. I didn't expect you to not even pant. You're much stronger than those knights. Undoubtedly, you didn't use magic. Tony chuckled as he carried the box on his shoulder. But then again, you are indeed worthy of having the same sword as me. If you want to wield a powerful sword, you also need a strong physique. It seems that you have a good understanding of this point. Are you praising yourself? Noah looked at Tony, who was not panting at all. Undoubtedly, aren't you the same? Yes. It's the same. Tony laughed happily. We really have a lot in common. Chapter 454. When André reached the roof of the cathedral, Tony was already holding the box in his hand. He opened the box and took out the sheathed sword. It was a standard knight's sword. The blade was more than 80 centimeters long. It had a double-edged blade and a thick and sturdy structure. However, it wasn't a powerful weapon. It wasn't a divine weapon or magic weapon. It was just an ordinary knight's sword that could be easily identified as a crude mass-produced weapon. Of course, the sword itself was rather ordinary, but the person holding it was definitely not ordinary. When Tony pulled out the sword from the scabbard and held it in his hand, Noah felt an inexplicable sense of danger. It was as if he was warning Noah not to let the other party have a sword in his hand, otherwise, something terrible would happen. Moreover, Tony didn't hold the sword in his hand. Instead, he lowered his hand as though he didn't have the strength to lift the sword. He didn't seem like he was going to attack or defend. He looked like a child holding a toy. Noah's expression gradually turned serious as he stared straight at Tony, who still had a sunny smile on his face, but his eyes had turned into a ferocious beast staring at its prey. After a while, Noah let out a sigh. It seems like you won't let me go if I don't fight with you. Don't say that. Isn't it a great thing for two people who have the same sword to fight each other? Tony's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes were terrifying. Other than my own kind and enemy, this is the first time I feel like I have to swing my sword at someone with all my might. So, please, don't disappoint me. Hearing Tony's words, André, who was frozen due to the vile atmosphere, finally reacted. His mouth gaped open in astonishment as he looked at Noah in a completely different way. Unlike Noah, André clearly understood the weight of the words kindred and enemies that Tony mentioned. He also understood the weight of Tony's words. Frankly speaking, with Tony's words, all the magicians in the world would know about Noah's existence by this time tomorrow. Noah would definitely be more famous than many knights and magicians who had the highest honor in the world. This was the significance of Tony's words. André thought that Tony was chasing after his own kind. However, he didn't know Noah at all and was certain that he wasn't Tony's own kind. Besides, Tony also said that Noah wasn't his own kind and enemy. So, was he just an ordinary knight or magician? If that was the case, then Noah was definitely an existence equivalent to those at the highest level in the entire world of magic to make Salbar Doni feel the need to wield his sword with all his might. André was on the same level as Tony. However, even André couldn't make Tony swing his sword at full strength. This was enough to prove the extent of Noah's power. André, who wanted to stop Tony at first, gave up. That was not only because he knew that Noah was not a simple person, but also because once Tony pulled out his sword, André would definitely be knocked down by Tony's sword if he wanted Tony to pull back his sword. Instead of standing in front of that idiot, I should think about how to clean up the mess. André said as if he had given up on himself. Then, using the magic of leap, he leaped away and landed on a building in the distance. He then took out his phone. All right, friend, it's your turn to draw your sword. Tony waved his empty hand calmly. Let me see your sword and sword. Sigh. Noah sighed impatiently. That's all I can do. Noah didn't think that he would have to fight someone whose strength he couldn't see through after coming to a new world. However, it was also a good opportunity to test the strength of the people in this world. Bang! Like an explosion, the flames in Noah's hands suddenly ignited and turned into a black knight's sword that fell into Noah's hand. Compared to Tony's sword that looked like it was mass-produced and could be forged by a normal person, Noah's knight's sword was as black gold. There were white lines on the sword with mysterious runes on it. It was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary sword. Oh. Tony raised an eyebrow. Is this your sword? There's no need to fight if I answer your question. You don't look like you have such thoughts, do you? Noah raised the knight's sword in his hand and pointed it at Tony. Since you want me to take out my sword, I'll accompany you this time. If you don't make me happy, I'll stab you with this thing you want to see. Ha 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 ha. Tony laughed heartily as a mountain-like pressure spread out from his body. That's right. That's how it should be. The moment the words left his mouth, Tony lifted his feet and slowly walked towards Noah. Like a run-up, he quickened his pace bit by bit. At a certain moment, he suddenly stomped his feet on the ground and shot forward. The knight's sword in his hand was aimed at Noah, slashing down furiously. Whang! Just as Tony slashed out with his sword, Noah's vision blurred. It was as if the sword had suddenly disappeared. He could only feel a sharp wind breaking chi in front of him, which made Noah's eyes narrow. Tony was indeed not an ordinary person. He didn't use magic or any other power. He just swung his sword. It was a pure physical attack, but it had the same effect as magic. His sword disappeared. It was not because of any magic, but because Tony had followed a perfect trajectory and slashed at Noah's blind spot, which should not have been possible from the front. However, with his excellent senses, Noah was still able to perceive the trajectory of the sword. Noah leaned his body slightly and quickly retreated. Swish! Tony's sword suddenly appeared and slashed at Noah's original position. Duh! After dodging Tony's outstanding strike, Noah immediately stepped forward and chopped down on Tony's head with the knight's sword in his right hand. Tony was not surprised by the energy coming from above his head. He raised his sword and slashed at the top of his head. Clang! The white knight's sword clashed with the black knight's sword, causing sparks to fly in all directions. The crisp sound of clashing resounded. Noah and Tony were both pushed back by each other's strength. However, they only took half a step back before they were able to stabilize themselves. Gently rubbing his palms on his sword, Tony let out a low roar in excitement. He stomped his feet on the ground and shot towards Noah. The sword in his hand trembled slightly. With a wave of his hand, a phantom appeared out of thin air like a mirage. The sword tip turned into a white shadow as Tony's sword stabbed towards Noah's neck from a tricky and vicious angle. There was no mercy at all. After the previous probing, Tony had already probed Noah's sword skill attainments. Therefore, there was no need to be merciful. Facing the sharp tip of the sword, Noah took a step back and raised the knight's sword in his hand to block in front of him. Swish! The cunning knight's sword tore through the air and pierced through the air like a bolt of lightning with a sharp sound. Clang! The pitch-black knight's sword appeared in front of the sharp tip of the sword as if it could predict the future, causing sparks to fly from the tip of the sword as it landed on the tip. Clang! 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 All of a sudden, the mirage-like swords landed on Noah's swords one after another. One attacked crazily while the other retreated conservatively. The two swords, one white and one black, clashed with each other. As Noah and Tony moved, sparks and crisp sounds filled the air with every clash. Sure enough. My feeling was right. Tony became more and more excited as the fight went on. Even those uncles who had been practicing swordsmanship for 30 years and call themselves knights were killed by my one strike. You can actually block so many of my strikes. I was not wrong. You have a very powerful sword. Let me see how powerful your sword is. Chapter 455. Clang. The crisp sounds of steel clashing against steel and the sparks that flew in all directions continuously reverberated through the roof of the great sage hall. The darkening space seemed to have been dyed bright as waves of red light flashed one after another. Chi! The tip of the sword that was pointed at the pitch-black knight's sword suddenly trembled slightly and swayed abruptly. It bypassed the knight's sword and shot towards Noah's neck. Looking at the sharp tip of the sword, Noah's figure retreated without hesitation. Amidst the clattering sounds, the tip of his feet constantly tapped on the ground. Every time he tapped on the ground, his body would fly back a certain distance in an extremely agile manner. Ha! Seeing Noah's sudden retreat, Tony let out a low roar and stomped his foot on the ground with a force much more violent than Noah's. Like a leaf in a gale, there seemed to be an invisible force pushing Tony out from behind. Tony quickly dashed towards Noah. Looking at Tony, who was hot on his heels, Noah narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have thought of something, and the corners of his mouth slowly rose. Tony, who clearly sensed the curled expression on Noah's face, instantly felt a warning in his heart. This caused Tony, who was shooting out, to suddenly stomp on the ground and forcefully stop his body in the most violent manner. However, stopping now would have given Noah too much time. Without warning, Noah suddenly leaped up and spun his body. Like a bullet that was about to be fired at Tony, his body was actually suspended in the air in the shape of the letter 1. Hum. A gorgeous vortex suddenly appeared under Noah's foot and covered the bottom of Noah's foot. Bang! With a loud explosion, the vortex under Noah's feet suddenly burst open, turning into an extremely ferocious thrust that propelled Noah's body forward like a bullet in the truest sense. Originally, the Great Leap technique was no longer of much help to Noah. Noah already had the idea of eliminating it. However, at this time, Noah didn't rely on the Great Leap to increase his speed. Instead, he relied on the Great Leap function that allowed Noah to use space as a stepping board. Sometimes, the effects of this ability would be extraordinary, and it was comparable to Andre's leap magic. Therefore, Noah chose to use the Great Leap as a surprise attack. Whoosh! Under Tony's shocked gaze, Noah, who was in mid-air, used the leap forward technique to shoot out like a bullet. He rotated the knight's sword in his hand for half a circle, and after he completely borrowed the force, he slammed it down on Tony with a fierce chi force. Is there such a way to fight? The ferocious energy coming from above made Tony yell, but he didn't dare to be careless at all. He turned the knight's sword in his hand and stirred up a faint whirlwind as if it was tearing the air apart. After a slight pause, with a piercing sound of wind breaking, he heavily tapped on the knight's sword that was coming at him. Ding! The loud sound of metal colliding rang out for a long time. Clang! Soon, another crisp sound of collision reverberated in the air. It was the sound of Noah's great leap strike on Tony's hastily raised knight's sword. Under such circumstances, coupled with the effect of the surprise attack, Tony more or less panicked and lost his balance from the heavy strike. Not good. Tony's expression changed as he tried to stabilize himself. Too slow. But Noah wouldn't let go of this opportunity. He spun his knight's sword and slammed it heavily on Tony's chest. Bang! A muffled sound suddenly rang out. Goo! Tony spat out a bitter groan. His body seemed to have been hit by a truck. The friction caused by the friction in the air caused him to fly backward and smash into the guardrail-like wall not far away. Bang! The powerful force caused Tony to smash through the wall, and he fell out of the roof of the great cathedral amidst the flying rubble, falling below the great cathedral. Shit! Noah came to his senses and cursed inwardly. I forgot to restrain my strength. The great cathedral wasn't small and its height naturally couldn't be underestimated. Although it was not comparable to a skyscraper, it was still possible for a human body to fall from. Unless Tony used magic or something like that, he would definitely be severely injured if he were to bear the impact with his physical body. No matter how strong his body was, he would definitely be severely injured. If his head fell down, Tony's fate would be tragic. Of course, Noah didn't think that Tony would fall to his death. Just as Noah was hesitating whether to go over and take a look, a hand suddenly reached out from below the smashed wall and placed on the ground. Then, a person climbed up from below. Wah, I thought I was dead for sure. With such a nonchalant cry, Tony climbed up in an extremely wretched manner, like he was not a human at all. Seeing this extremely mundane scene, Noah fell into a state of speechlessness. Noah had imagined that Tony would use some kind of magic to suddenly fly up from below. He also thought that Tony would directly appear in front of him like teleportation. However, Noah really didn't expect that Tony would actually climb up. What should he say? Noah began to suspect that Tony was really hiding his strength. Under Noah's scrutinizing gaze, Tony patted the dust on his body and raised his head. He looked at Noah with the same sunny expression as before, but the look in his eyes had completely changed. He became impassioned. This was Tony's performance when he truly began to value Noah. I didn't think that I would lose in a duel of swords. Undoubtedly, even the hierarch can't do anything to me in this aspect. You're really satisfying. Tony's eyes met Noah's scrutinizing gaze. His expression more or less revealed the battle thirst of a pure warrior. What's your name? Although Tony had been pestering Noah to duel with him, he had never asked for Noah's name. The reason was simple. Back then, Noah hadn't shown that he was worthy enough for Tony to remember his name. But now, Tony was asking for his name. It was impossible for Noah not to understand what this meant. Noah Doria. You can call me Noah. Noah, huh? Tony muttered before nodding. Okay. I'll remember your name. Noah certainly didn't know how difficult it was for Tony to remember a person's name. To put it bluntly, there were no more than 10 people who could make Tony remember the name of their first meeting. And each of these 10 people was an existence that possessed unparalleled power in this world. I'll admit it. I lost in a duel of swords. Tony stared at Noah and said. But I can still use a sword that no one in this world can block. A sword that no one in this world can block? Noah's heart tightened. These words were definitely not just empty words. Originally, I didn't want to use such a sword because it can't be considered as my sword skill. It's just an opportunistic strength. But since I lost in a duel of swords, it would be rude if I don't show you my true strength. Tony lowered his hand that was holding the sword. I'll show you something special. My authority. When these words entered Noah's ears, Noah's heart let out an unprecedented cry. It was a sense of crisis. A real sense of crisis. Although he didn't know what Tony meant by authority, Noah believed him for no reason. It was definitely something very dangerous. Something so dangerous that it could take Noah's life. This made Noah's body tense up. His heart was in his mouth. At this moment, Tony suddenly opened his mouth and chanted an incantation. I hereby swear that I won't allow anything that I can't cut to exist. This sword can cut through everything on earth. It is an invincible blade. An unimaginable amount of power gushed out from Tony's body and turned into a fluorescent light that covered Tony's entire body. Chapter 456. I swear that I will not allow anything to exist that I cannot cut through. This sword can cut through everything on earth. It is an invincible blade. As the words left Tony's mouth like a proclamation, a vast power that caused the air to tremble rose from Tony's body. It was like a strong light that made Tony look like a god. Under such circumstances, Tony's sword-wielding hand began to change. Kacha kacha. Amidst the sound of ice, Tony's arm turned silver. It was the purest color of steel. Like the arm of an exquisite sculpture, Tony gripped the sword tightly with his silver hand, causing the sword to shine with a silver light. At that moment, Noah clearly felt it. He could feel the terrifying aura released from Tony's sword that was obviously a mass-produced weapon. It made Noah's heart palpitate. I can't block it. That sword can't block it. No. It should be said that if he chose to block the sword, then Noah was likely to be in danger. Without hesitation, Noah mobilized all the mana in his body. Amidst the vibrations in the space, terrifying mana gushed out of Noah's body like a tidal wave, turning into a white light that illuminated every corner of the place. The brilliant white light was all gathered on the knight's sword in Noah's hand, making the pitch-black knight sword completely turn into a dazzling pure white in an instant, blooming with dazzling light. Whoa, what kind of curse is this? Tony was surprised for the first time. You're obviously not my kind, but you actually have such a strong curse power. If it wasn't for the fact that I didn't feel a strange aura from your body, I would have suspected that you're my kind. You've been talking about same kind, since the beginning. If you're referring to the issue of race, then I'm sorry, I'm just an ordinary human, not a monster like you who suddenly jumped out. Noah raised the knight's sword in his hand, his gaze was unprecedentedly solemn. Looks like this move should be able to determine the victor between us. Let me see what kind of power this so-called authority you speak of is. You don't know? Tony was startled at first, but then the corner of his mouth rose. If that's the case, then you'd better watch carefully. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying power that could rival a storm surged out with Tony at the center, sweeping out in all directions. It was mana. But in Tony's words, it was called curse in this world. Sensing the terrifyingly massive mana, Noah's heart was filled with astonishment. The mana rising from Tony's body was no weaker than Noah's. This was the first time Noah met someone who could match him in terms of mana. Are there really such terrifying people everywhere in this world? Are there so many of them that I've just arrived in this world? Noah gripped his sword tightly and took a deep breath. The magic power rising from his body became even more violent, and like Tony, it swept out like a storm. Tony's blood boiled as he gazed at the storm of mana around Noah's body that couldn't be affected by his own power. Then, here I come. Tony gripped the hilt of his sword with both hands and raised it above his head. His eyes were as bright and scorching as the sun as he stared at Noah with intense battle intent and arrogance. He suddenly smiled. In the next moment, Tony swung the sword down heavily. Clang! When Tony swung his knight's sword, which was wrapped in terrifying magic power, an invisible slash suddenly appeared and cut through the air. With a sharp sword hum, it flashed past like a half-moon shadow and fell on Noah. Whang! Wherever the invisible slash passed, the space violently trembled, as if it could collapse at any time, and violently fluctuated. Noah's sense of crisis exploded. Almost instinctively, Noah used all of his magic power to cast, crush, to cover the knight's sword, and raised it horizontally in front of him. With the full support of the superior grade destruction spell, Crush, even if Hades released an attack with all his strength, when it landed on Noah's knight's sword, it would explode in an instant, shattering without a trace. However, it was under such circumstances that Noah could not believe what happened. Clang! A slash that could not be seen with the naked eye cut through the air and landed on Noah's sword that was dyed pure white by the brilliant white light. Kacha! With a crisp breaking sound, the invisible slash cut through the brilliant white light covering the knight's sword. Then, it cut through the knight's sword, revealing its original black luster. Pa! From the middle of the sword that was born from Noah's soul, it was cut in half without any resistance. Then, without losing any momentum, the slash went through the broken knight's sword and landed on Noah's body amidst the vibrations in the air. Magician! Noah, whose pupils had shrunk to the size of a needle tip, let out a low bellow, releasing the other weapon in his soul. Bang! In the surging blue flames, the power called Magician released the other weapon in Noah's soul. When the blue flames dissipated, a thick black shield was already standing in front of Noah. Clang! The untraceable slash landed on the pitch-black heavy shield that the magician had transformed into, stirring up a violent gust of wind and blazing red sparks, causing the deafening sound of the collision to resound through the sky. However, this scene did not last long. Kacha! With a cracking sound, a crack appeared on the pitch-black heavy shield. Bang! Immediately after, the pitch-black heavy shield that the magician had transformed into was also cut in half. With a muffled explosion, the shield shattered into pieces, leaving a path for the knight's sword to escape. Clang! Andre, who was on the phone at the top of another building, suddenly saw a sword light flashing from the roof of the great cathedral. It fell down and swept across the entire great cathedral in a straight line. Kacha. The majestic great sage hall was neatly sliced apart by that sharp sword light. It was split into two halves, separating from each other and falling to the sides. Rumble. A loud sound that made the earth tremble was heard. The great cathedral, which had an extremely long history and scale, was turned into ruins and collapsed with a loud bang. Did it really become like this? Andre could not help but feel sad. Andre had already guessed this situation. After all, among the two people in the battle, one of them was the king that the whole world was afraid of. If this level of damage was enough to end the battle, then it was already not bad. Thinking like this, Andre recomposed himself and used leap magic to jump in the direction of the collapsed great cathedral. At the same time, in the center of the ruined great cathedral, two people were facing each other. With a "pa" sound, Noah knelt on the ground with one knee and his breathing became somewhat rapid. Recalling the sword strike that could split the heavens and earth, Noah cast his gaze toward the other side with lingering fear. There, Tony was staring blankly at Noah and was extremely stunned. "You blocked it? My magic sword?" Hearing this, Noah did not have time to answer before a sudden sharp pain came from his head. Goo! The excessive pain made Noah hold his head and let out a muffled groan. It was not the pain caused by Tony's attack. It was the mental damage caused by the destruction of his soul. A total of 2 pieces of the blaze were destroyed, which made Noah's mind suffer a violent impact and his consciousness gradually faded away. Before losing consciousness, Noah heard Tony's laughter that represented joy and pleasure. "You actually blocked my authority. You are the opponent that the heavens have prepared for me. I have my eyes on you. Become stronger. Become strong enough to fight me with all your strength." Noah Dole. Chapter 457. When Noah regained consciousness, he heard a frivolous voice before he could open his eyes. "Oh. You're awake?" Noah shuddered when he heard the familiar voice. He quickly opened his eyes and took in everything before him. 2 people entered Noah's sight. "Yo." Tony, who was holding a cup of ice cream in his hand and eating while humming an unknown song, greeted Noah with a bright smile on his face. "Did you sleep well?" Tony greeted Noah very naturally, like greeting a roommate in the same dormitory. Others might think that Noah had a good relationship with Tony. As a result, Noah was in a trance for a second. "I'm really sorry, Sir Noah." Andre, who was wearing a pair of glasses, sat beside Tony with an expressionless face. "Please allow me to introduce myself to you. I am Andre Rivera, a trusted aide of Minister Salvador. You can just call me Andre." Hearing this, Noah finally reacted and recalled what happened before he lost consciousness. Because the knight's sword and revolver were destroyed by Tony's so-called authority, Noah also suffered from the mental impact of his soul being destroyed and lost consciousness. Recalling this matter, Noah had the spare energy to observe his surroundings. What surprised Noah was that he wasn't on the ground, but in the sky. To be more precise, he was on a plane. Through the window, Noah saw that the sky had turned completely dark and found himself in a first-class cabin. There were only 3 people in the cabin: Noah, Tony, and Andre. Undoubtedly, Noah was on the ground before he lost consciousness and woke up in the cabin. No matter how stupid he was, he could guess that Tony and Andre brought him here. Noah was stunned. "What are you guys doing?" "I'm really sorry." Before Tony could say anything, Andre calmly explained for Noah, as if he was afraid that he would cause even more trouble. "It's rude of us to bring you on the plane without your permission, but this is the order of the king. So, please forgive us, Sir Noah. We'll talk about that later." Noah frowned and shifted his gaze to Tony. "I want to know why you brought me on the plane." "Well, don't be so angry. You must be bored on that island. So, as your best friend, I helped you make the decision," Tony said proudly, but his next sentence exposed his true intention. "Besides, you're my opponent, how can I let you go?" Noah's mouth twitched when he heard that. He turned to look at Andre. "Can I kill him with a single slash?" Please forgive us. Andre pushed up his glasses and said. Although this troublesome, no, Minister Salbat Lay was indeed rude, that was only because of the king's recognition of you. Please take this honor into consideration, and at the very least, don't fight on the plane. I'd like to fight with you again. Tony's eyes suddenly became serious as he stared at Noah. After all, you blocked my authority. I haven't met such an interesting opponent in a long time. You have to fight with me until the end. To be honest, I'm also very shocked. Andre raised his head. His reflective glasses made it impossible to see his expression, but the disbelief in his voice still showed. To be able to block that authority is something that even gods can't do. Sir, you accomplished this feat as a normal human. I believe that you will be famous all over the world. Can you guys wait? Noah's frown deepened. What is authority? And you just said God, right? Are you referring to the gods? After hearing his words, Tony and Andre exchanged a glance with each other. By the way, do you really not know anything? Tony asked curiously. Then do you know about the God Slayer? God Slayer? This title is really arrogant. Or, in this world, there are not only real gods, but also the so-called God Slayer? If that's the case, then this world is dangerous. No, I can't jump to conclusions. Let's ask first. To tell you the truth, I really don't know anything. Noah said bluntly. So, if you can explain it to me, I'll be very happy. You really don't know anything? Tony blinked. Seems like you're dumber than me. Endure. Before I get the information I want, I'll endure it and wait for the opportunity to kill this guy. Generally speaking, with your strength, it's impossible for you to not know anything. However, it's too insensible of you to ask about other people's privacy. Andre sized Noah up seriously and changed the topic of the conversation. In that case, if you don't mind, as an apology for bringing you on the plane without your permission, let me explain it to you. After saying that, Andre explained the background of this world to Noah. There was no doubt that this was a modern world. However, in this world, there were also various unknown organizations. It was a group of people who used miracles that had survived the grinding of a long history. In Europe, these groups were called magic societies. Of course, the miracles used by these so-called magic societies were magic. In other countries, there were also groups that used powers that existed before, such as China's martial arts and magic, Japan's yin-yang jutsu and curses, and so on. Andre was a knight who was born in Europe. The knights here were not the kind of warriors who only knew how to wield swords and spears, but they were individuals who practiced both swords and magic. In Europe's magic societies, many of those who practiced both swords and magic were called knights. Among the knights, a group of people who were particularly outstanding and powerful would be awarded the rank of a Grand Knight. However, above the Grand Knight, there was a rank called Paladin. That was the highest honor that a knight could obtain. Obtaining the rank of a Paladin meant that this person was already at the top of the world. There were only 6 kings in the world that could suppress people who obtained the rank of a Paladin. God Slayer. If the Paladins were still in the category of human beings, then the God Slayer was a true monster. He was an inhuman existence that could trample countless Paladins, the most glorious of human beings, under his feet. Perhaps some people would scoff at this title and think that it was nonsense. However, just as the name suggested, the so-called God Slayer referred to those who had slaughtered the gods and usurped the power of the gods. Authority. That was a power that only the gods could use. The humans who killed the gods would usurp this power from the gods and use it for themselves. Once they obtained the authority of the gods, this person was no longer a human, but a God Slayer, a real inhuman existence. Therefore, the God Slayer was called the Tyrant, also known as the Demon King, a true king above all humans. Tony was one of the God Slayers. In other words, not only did Noah encounter the only 6 God Slayers in the world in less than an hour after he arrived in this world, but the God Slayer also found fault with him. Not only did he fight with the God Slayer, but he also used the power of a human to block the power of a god. It was just that unbelievable. Noah silently looked at Tony, who was smiling at him, then shook his head at Andre. I won't doubt your words, but you said that this guy is a god slayer. To be honest, I really want to refute that. I understand your feelings very well. Andre's voice was full of sincerity when he said this. It was obvious that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Many people don't want to believe in this nightmare, but it is the truth. This idiot. No, Sarbaltlay is indeed a god slayer, there is no doubt about that. Isn't that too much? Tony protested, but he was ignored by Noah and Andre at the same time. That was all Noah asked with a frown on his face. Do gods really exist? Chapter 458. Noah could be considered to have been to many worlds. In these worlds, even if Noah hadn't seen them before, he had more or less heard of them. For example, in the world of fairy tale, there were dragons and demons. Although Noah had not seen them, Naz, Gadjalu, and Wendy were the children of dragons. Mira had also received the power of demons, which made Noah feel their existence. In the world of Magician's Night, it was needless to say. The fantasy species that only existed in fantasy were not much different from the gods. They were all existences that originally only existed in fantasy and myths. Noah even met two gods who called themselves his mother, Gaia and Aleia. These two existences were even more powerful than the so-called gods. Therefore, if he met the so-called gods in any world, Noah would not be surprised. Noah only wanted to know if such existences could really run all over the world and be eliminated by humans, giving birth to the 6 god slayers. That was why Noah asked such a question in a roundabout way. Do gods really exist? Or rather, do gods really exist in this world? Noah wanted to know the answer to this question. Perhaps Andre understood the meaning of Noah's words, but after thinking for a while, he shook his head. We don't know if they are the omnipotent gods that we imagine, but they were indeed born based on the myths that humans weaved. They are inexplicable existences that originally only existed in myths. A long, long time ago, God should have been able to freely roam the world. However, humans created myths and legends, so God could only exist according to the content of the myths and could not truly descend into this world, Andre explained. The only gods that can appear on earth are those who rebelled against the myths and went against the content of the myths, bringing disaster to the world and humans. We call them the God of Disobedience. I defeated the God of Disobedience and successfully usurped the power of the gods, obtained the authority, and became a God Slayer. Tony's tone was so relaxed that it was as if he was talking about killing a mosquito instead of killing a god. Well, although I didn't have that idea at first, when I came back to my senses, I had already become such a troublesome existence. The first time, I almost died, but later on, it was much smoother. Sarbather is indeed a king who killed a god, Andre seemed to be unable to bear Tony's words and said seriously. Although I don't know if they are omnipotent gods in the religious sense, it is a fact that the God of Disobedience will appear all over the world from time to time, and only the God Slayers, who also have the power of God, can fight against them. Therefore, the magic societies all around the world will respect the God Slayers. It is not only because they can protect humans from the gods, but also because humans can't resist them. Having said that, Andre sized up Noah again. Your Excellency Noah, now you know how shocking your achievements are, right? Aren't you exaggerating a little? Noah glanced at Tony without changing his expression. Indeed, Tony is very powerful, but I only blocked his sword. It's not worth the exaggeration, is it? It's not an exaggeration. Andre finally laughed bitterly. Do you know what the authority that Sarbather used when he fought you was? Upon hearing this, Noah could not help but be startled. In Europe, there is a wise parliament that specializes in collecting information on God Slayers. The wise parliament named Sarbather's Silver Hand of Rending. Andre hesitated for a moment and finally chose to reveal this piece of information that many people knew. That is the authority that Sarbathur seized from the Celtic god king, Nuada. It is the power that allows Sarbathur to gain the ability to cut through everything. Not only does it increase the attack range of Sarbathur's slash, but it can also cut through everything. Not to mention fragile things like the human body, it can even cut through magic, the ground, and even the sea. Therefore, even most gods can't block Sarbathur's slash head-on. That was why Sarbathur called it, the sword that no one in this world can block. That was why Sarbathur could use the authority of the demon's sword to gain the power to fight against the gods. After understanding this, Noah was speechless, and at the same time, he smiled bitterly in his heart. Block Sarbathur's demon sword? But Noah did not block Sarbathur's slash at all. Tony's sword had cut Noah's crush, knight's sword, and a magician, which had been strengthened by hardening runes, into two halves. How could Noah block such a tyrannical sword? The reason Noah was able to remain unscathed under Sarbathur's slash was because he released Bio at the critical moment and let Bio take Sarbathur's demon sword in his place. After that, Bio was cut in half by Sarbathur's demon sword and returned to Noah's body. Of course, Bio did not have a fixed form, so physical attacks could not do any damage to Bio. He was also the nemesis of Sarbathur's demon sword. It was because Bio took Sarbathur's slash that Noah was able to remain unscathed. Therefore, it was not Noah who blocked Sarbathur's demon sword, but Bio's body that took the damage from Sarbathur's demon sword, preventing it from touching Noah's body. However, Noah now understood why Sarbathur's slash was so terrifying. Sarbathur's silver hand should be referring to Sarbathur's silver arm. Sarbathur's silver arm could not only increase the range of his attack, but it could also cut through everything. Even magic, the ground, and the sea could be cut in half. It was because of this that Sarbathur could not see Sarbathur's slash from such a long distance away. Sarbathur's knight's sword and magician were also cut in half by Sarbathur's crush and magician. If Bio was not there, Noah would be in danger. Alright, I understand how powerful the God-slayer is now. Noah looked at Sarbathur and said doubtfully. But even if I can block your demon sword, it doesn't mean that I can win, right? That's why I brought you here. Sarbathur's expression became more or less unpleasant. I even used my authority, but you suddenly fell. Undoubtedly, you did not receive any damage and the battle ended. It's really annoying. Speaking of which, why did you suddenly fall? Andre was also puzzled. Your Excellency has already blocked Sarbathur's slash. You can definitely continue the battle with Sarbathur, right? That's right, that's right. That's why that battle does not count. Sarbathur shouted like a child. Unless you fight with me again, I won't admit the outcome of that battle. You're a god-slayer, yet you still want to keep pestering a normal person like me? Noah was stunned. If you like to battle so much, you should go find those gods of disobedience. Only they can satisfy you, can't they? Those are just enemies, not opponents. Sarbathur smiled, but his eyes were extremely bright. I don't lack enemies, I only lack opponents. But you shouldn't be looking for me, right? Noah frowned. Even if I can block your slash, I'm just a normal person. Aren't there 5 other god-slayers in this world other than you? Can't you go find them and fight? But you have a sword that even I can only admit defeat, right? Sarbathur narrowed his eyes and stared at Noah. If I can't fight you with my full strength when we both have the same sword, that would be too boring. Fight you with your full strength? Noah was stunned for a moment and was speechless. So, you plan to fight me when we get off the plane? However, Sarbathur unexpectedly shook his head. We both have the same sword, but I still have my authority. If I fight you with my full strength, it would be like cheating. Even if I win, there's nothing to be happy about. Then why did you bring me here? Noah rolled his eyes. Why? Sarbathur suddenly smiled. Well, don't worry, I already have a plan. Noah and Andre immediately became alert. If they were led by the nose by this idiot, it would definitely cause some trouble in the end. Definitely. Chapter 459. After that, Noah found out from Andre that he hadn't been in a coma for long. He had only woken up about 2 hours later. Originally, if the blaze was destroyed, the user would have to sleep for at least a full day before waking up. Moreover, they would also fall into a state of fatigue, and so on. It would take at least 3 days or even a week before they could fully recover. However, Noah was different from the other blaze users. Noah's blaze was not a materialization of the soul, but a materialization of the weapon. It was an external weapon that transformed into a part of the user's soul. Therefore, even if Noah's blaze was destroyed, Noah would only receive a part of the mental impact. He would not be like the other blaze users, who would fall into a severe coma once the blaze was destroyed. Therefore, Noah only used a short 2 hours to recover. Other than that, there were no other side effects. If it wasn't for the fact that Tony's magic sword had destroyed 2 of his blaze fangs, Noah wouldn't have fainted. However, this battle with Tony gave Noah a reminder. Noah's blaze was indeed a very useful and powerful weapon. However, at the same time, by exposing a part of his soul to the enemy's attack range, Noah had exposed his weakness. In the past, Noah had always thought that with the blaze's hardness and the hardening runes, the blaze would not be so easily destroyed. But now, it seemed that there was always someone better than him. In this world, there were also people like Tony who possessed such terrifying strength. Therefore, he had to be more careful when using the blaze. Otherwise, once the blaze was destroyed, even if Noah did not lose, he would still be injured. It would be very disadvantageous for him in battle. The battle with Tony proved this point. If not for the blaze being destroyed and causing Noah to fall into a coma, then Noah would have been able to continue the battle. In the end, whether or not he would have lost to Tony was another matter. However, Noah had to admit that Tony, the God Slayer, was indeed very strong. In terms of overall strength, he should be above Noah. In addition, Andre had intentionally or unintentionally revealed that Tony did not only have the silver hand, but also had other powers. Presumably, Tony's strength had reached a level that Noah could not imagine for the time being. Just thinking about how he had met such a terrifying person when he had just arrived in this world gave Noah a headache. Fortunately, there were less than 6 people like Tony in the world. Otherwise, Noah would really have to consider whether he should be a little more restrained in this world and search for the world fragment, while trembling in fear. Just like this, with Andre explaining the structure and background of this world and Tony's yawns, Noah's group finally arrived at their destination after dawn. Rome Fiumicino Airport, the international airport of the Italian capital. Under Andre's lead, Noah and Tony both yawned as they walked out of the airport. Noah looked tired and yawned repeatedly because he had spent the whole night trying to get more information about this world from Andre. He hadn't slept all night, so he looked tired and yawned continuously. Tony, on the other hand, just wanted to sleep in. However, when Andre saw this scene, he felt that Noah and Tony were unexpectedly harmonious. Rome? After yawning, Noah glanced at Tony. It's time for you to tell me why you brought me here, right? Well, don't be so anxious. Perhaps it was because Noah mentioned something important. Tony's spirit was lifted, and he asked Andre with a rare serious expression. The people should have gathered, right? Since you're the one who gave the order, they naturally won't disobey. But no matter what, there's only one night. There's no way they can make it here in time, right? Andre pushed up his glasses and looked at Tony with a bitter expression. If you allow, let me ask, why did you ask all the magic associations in Italy to gather here in the capital? All the magic associations in Italy to gather in Rome? Hearing this sentence, Noah was stunned. Noah did not doubt that Tony had the power to gather all the magic associations in Italy. After all, Tony was not only a king who killed gods, but he was also the King of Swords, who ruled the magic associations in Italy and was respected as the leader of the local magicians. Although he was the leader, Tony basically ruled over all the magic associations under his rule without ruling. This was not surprising because Tony himself was not a leader at all. If he really managed all the magic associations in Italy, the world would have been in chaos. It was precisely because of this that André was able to accompany Tony and play the role of alliance leader for Tony. As an old friend of Tony before he became the God Slayer, André was not only Tony's confidant but also had the title of Deacon Wang. He was one of the few people who could criticize Tony directly. It could be said that without André, Tony could only be regarded as a warrior and did not have the function of being the leader of the magic circle in Italy. According to André, he was usually responsible for the statistics of all the problems related to gods in Italy and was responsible for the work of letting Tony solve these problems. Tony also felt that these things were too troublesome, so he threw them all to André and was satisfied with just being responsible for fighting. But now, Tony had taken the initiative to exercise his authority as the leader of the alliance. Suspicious. It was too suspicious. Not to mention André, even Noah was vigilant and looked at the smiling humanoid troublemaker in front of him. Since you have something to do, then I won't bother you. Let's part ways here, bye-bye. Leaving this sentence, Noah was just about to run away when Tony tightly grabbed his shoulder. Don't be so cold. It's rare to come to the capital of Italy and see the gathering of all the magic associations in Italy. As your best friend, how can I not take you to see it? Tony smiled very brightly. In short, you come with me. Rare? Undoubtedly, it was you who kidnapped me. You call it rare? Even those magic associations were gathered by you. Is that rare? Noah was getting more and more ominous premonition, which made him extremely resistant. Besides, I'm not your confidant, nor will I be your best friend. There's no need for me to go to that kind of event. Let go of me. After saying that, Noah struggled to get up, but Tony held him tightly. How troublesome. In that case, I can only drag you over by force. Thus, Noah and Tony got into a scuffle outside the airport, leaving the corner of André's mouth twitching. Perhaps the two of them might actually get along. In the end, Noah was dragged away by Tony's persistent pestering. All the magic associations in Italy would gather in the largest hotel in Rome. Noah, Tony, and André arrived at the hotel together. Under the guidance of the waitress who didn't look like an ordinary person, they took the elevator to the top floor and arrived at an extremely spacious room. Tony's summoning order was issued just before boarding the plane. In other words, only one night had passed since the summoning order was issued. Naturally, it was impossible to gather all the magic associations in Italy in one night. So, until now, only one person in charge of the magic association had arrived at the hotel. The room that Noah and the rest arrived at was the room where the person from the magic association stayed. According to André, the other party seemed to have just fallen asleep last night, but got up because of Tony's summoning order and rushed to the hotel overnight. Perhaps it wasn't just the people from this magic association, but all the people in charge of the magic associations in Italy. They rushed over last night but hadn't arrived yet. What an irresponsible king. With André pushing the door open, two figures soon appeared in front of Noah. Chapter 460. In that extremely luxurious suite, at this moment, a man and a woman were sitting on the sofa respectively, seemingly chatting. The man was about 40 years old. He wasn't burly, but he was abnormally tall and straight. He had a well-sculpted face and an intellectual temperament. He looked like an iron general who had been on the battlefield for a long time and had undergone extremely strict training. He gave off a mellow, elegant, and dignified feeling of vicissitudes. A young lady sat opposite the dignified middle-aged man. She looked about 15 or 16 years old and was slightly over 160 centimeters tall. She had waist-length golden hair and an exquisite face that made one wonder if it was specially crafted by a famous craftsman. That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that this petite young lady exuded a noble and confident temperament. Her delicate face was also filled with the dignity and confidence of a queen. The instant Noah saw this young lady, he felt as though he saw Lilith. Both of them shared an unusual similarity in terms of appearance and temperament. Logically speaking, compared to a 40-year-old middle-aged man. An average male would definitely be attracted to such a temperamental young lady when entering such a room. However, apart from Noah, who paid a little attention to this young lady due to her resemblance to Lilith, both Tony and Andre shifted their attention to the middle-aged man. "Long time no see, Mr. Salbar." The middle-aged man stood up and bowed to Tony before greeting Andre. "Long time no see, Mr. Andre." "Long time no see, Mr. Salbar, Mr. Andre." The golden-haired girl also stood up. Instead of saying that she was confident, it would be more appropriate to say that she was gorgeous. However, her smile was extremely aggressive, just like that of a female lion. "It's a pleasure to see both of you as healthy as before." "Long time no see." Andre returned the greeting politely. Oh, I was wondering who arrived first." "So it's the two of you." Compared to Andre, Tony's greeting was as straightforward as if he was greeting an acquaintance. However, don't think that Tony is being polite. Ugh. Tony scratched his head at the golden-haired young lady. "You're that Browntree? Erica Browntree." The girl named Erica smiled elegantly at Tony as if she was not surprised in the slightest. "You should remember my name by now, right?" "Sorry, my memory isn't too good, which is why I can't remember any of those troublesome magic tricks. Only this thing works better." Tony patted the box on his shoulder and chuckled. "Of course, no matter how bad my memory is, I'll remember the names of people I've met 5 times. I've only met you 3 times, right?" "We've met 7 times, my monarch." The gorgeous smile on Erica's face finally disappeared, but her confident expression remained. "No matter what, I, Erica Browntree, am happy to see you as healthy as before." Hearing this, everyone, including Noah, except Tony, had the same thought in their minds. Erica Browntree was probably lying, right? After all, the God Slayer was an existence that could be called the Demon King. Although he could protect humans from the hands of God, at the same time, because of his overly powerful strength, he could cause all kinds of problems and cause trouble for humans. For example, Tony, who was an empty-headed guy, wouldn't mind stirring up the whole of Italy as long as he had a battle that satisfied him. He was a real troublemaker. Therefore, everyone could tell that Erica Browntree's words were insincere. "Let me introduce them to everyone." Andre stepped forward to let Noah enter the field of vision of everyone present as if he wanted to change the topic. "This is Paolo Browntree, the general of the Magic Club, Red Copper Black Cross in Milan." Andre introduced the middle-aged man to Noah before introducing Erica. "This is Erica Brantley, also a member of the Red Bronze Black Cross. Generalissimo Paolo is Miss Erica's uncle, and Miss Erica herself is a genius child who has obtained the rank of the Grand Knight. There is only one other person in Italy who has obtained the same honor at her age." "Oh." Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Erica. Under Noah's gaze, Erica wasn't moved by Andre's evaluation at all. Instead, she smiled brilliantly as if it was a matter of course. "Andre, you don't have to say that. The achievements of me, Erica Browntree, are known to all of Italy. No, the whole world. There's no need to say anything." Hearing that, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Erica immediately frowned and looked at Noah with a slightly unhappy look. "Sir, are you making fun of me?" "You misunderstood." Noah shrugged. "It's just that your appearance, temperament, and tone are all very similar to a friend of mine, so I couldn't help but laugh." "I'm sorry." "That's right." Although they couldn't be said to be carved from the same mold, Lilith and Erica were both confident and gorgeous. Even their appearances were very similar, with both blonde hair reaching their waists. Looking at Erica, Noah felt as if he were looking at Lilith, which was why he chuckled. "I see." Erica, on the other hand, combed her long hair with relief. "To be able to be mentioned in the same breath as me, Erica Browntree, your friend must also be a gorgeous lady, right? Well, rather than a lady, it's better to call her a young lady, right?" Recalling Lilith's willfulness and confidence, the corners of Noah's mouth slowly curled up. "In this regard, Miss Erica is exactly the same as my friend." Is that so? Erica narrowed her eyes, and the gorgeous smile on her face began to transition to a somewhat dangerous level. But I'm not a young lady who only knows how to embroider in her room. Sir, why don't you try my sword and magic a little? With that said, traces of spell power began to rise from Erica's body with a confident and elegant smile. In this world, the power used to perform miracles, such as the aura of the East, the magic power of the West, and the spiritual power of the East, were collectively known as spell power. It was due to this that in the previous battle, Tony sincerely said to Noah that his spell power was really strong. In other words, Noah's magic power was also known as spell power, which was the general name of the world. Noah didn't expect Erica to have such a strong desire to show off. His gaze toward her became thought-provoking. She really is similar in all aspects, Erica. Paul reprimanded. Don't be rude. Uncle, you're wrong. Erica suddenly smiled. For us knights, exchanging swords is also a kind of etiquette. Since this sir can accompany Sarbar like Andre, it seems that he is also a capable person who is no weaker than a grand knight. Let me give him the opportunity to dance with me. That's something that others can't even ask for. Andre and Paul looked at each other in dismay. This Erica was no longer confident but arrogant, wasn't she? But this arrogance is not disgusting at all. Sure enough, this girl is carved from the same mold as Lilith. Miss Erica, you'd better leave this opportunity for others. Noah pretended to raise his hands in surrender and took the opportunity to speak. I'm just a passerby. You can talk about business. I'll take my leave. With that, Noah turned around, and Tony's face immediately appeared in front of him, giving Noah a fright. My dear friend, stay with me for a while longer. It'll be over soon. Tony grabbed Noah's shoulder with a smile. While Noah looked sullen, he turned his head and looked at Paul. Are you the only ones here? The other magic societies are still on their way. Paul laughed dryly. The order was just issued last night. It's a bit late. How troublesome. Forget it, I won't wait anymore. You can tell them when they come. Tony made such a declaration. I want news of God. The sooner, the better. Chapter 461. I want news of the gods. The sooner the better. When this sentence came out of Tony's mouth and entered the ears of Noah, Andre, Paul, and Erica, almost everyone had the same thought. This King of Swords must be itching to cause trouble again. This is going to be a little difficult. Paul had a troubled look on his face. Sarbatli should also understand that although the gods have left a lot of traces in this world, the god of disobedience can't appear at will. Could it be that Sarbatli has a way to summon the god of disobedience yourself? If there was such a way, it would be easy. I wouldn't be here. Tony waved his hand very casually. Anyway, you all go and collect news of the gods. If there is any, tell me immediately. Also, I don't want the kind of gods that are so weak that they can't even take one sword strike from me. They must be the kind of god of disobedience, that is at the level of the god king or main god. There were strong and weak gods. According to Andre, the strength of the gods was not determined by their strength or popularity in mythology, but whether they had a strong sense of self. Therefore, the god of disobedience that appeared on the ground also had strong and weak gods. The powerful god of disobedience could easily sink a small island and bring about disasters like natural disasters. For example, once one of those famous sun gods appeared, the whole earth would be in high temperature just by appearing. The god king and main god level gods that Tony mentioned were such existences, which could be said to be the highest level of gods. Some of the weak god of disobedience couldn't even take one sword strike from Tony. But that was only relative to the kings who killed gods. In the face of such gods, humans were not without the ability to resist, but they were absolutely unable to confront them head-on. At most, they could only seal them. It was because of this that god slayers were not so easy to be born. It was a miracle that could not be achieved by the power of humans themselves, and even the most advanced magicians could not do it. To be able to become a god slayer was all based on luck. Moreover, it wasn't the ordinary kind of luck. It had to be the kind of luck that triggered 3 or 4 miracles under very, very rare circumstances. In other words, wanting to become a god slayer was no less than a beggar wanting to become an emperor who ruled the world. No matter what, gods and god-slaying kings were not welcomed. Such an existence that possessed a power that humans absolutely could not resist brought unimaginable fear and chaos to people. Just like now, Doni proposed that they must find the whereabouts of God. Even if Paolo was the commander of the Magic Society, Red Copper Black Cross, which had the ability to rank among the top in Italy, he still couldn't resist. Most importantly, such an irresistible existence was now asking people to find another even more irresistible existence. It was imaginable how difficult and helpless Paul was. I don't think you should be anxious about this kind of thing. Even Erica showed some distress and said, since ancient times, the most abundant thing is the appearance of the god of disobedience. I remember that you have become a god slayer for less than 5 years, but you still killed 4 god of disobedience in these 5 years. So, please wait patiently. There will always be a chance to satisfy you in the future. Here, as a king, you should be more understanding to the person who gives advice. Even Andre was half advising and half warning. Please listen to Miss Erica's request and show your tolerance, King. What a joke. If it was not necessary, who would want to let the god of disobedience fight with the god of disobedience? That would definitely bring trouble to the people around in the form of disasters. So, no matter what, Erica and others had to be perfunctory. I know these things. Doni frowned. Do I look like someone who likes to cause trouble? As soon as this sentence came out, Erica, Paul, and Andre looked at Doni speechlessly. Their stares made Doni feel guilty. This time, I really don't want to mess around. Doni quickly argued. As you said, the god will appear sooner or later, and by then, this god will still need to be dealt with. In that case, isn't it the same for you to take the initiative to collect information? Upon hearing that, Erica, Paul, and Andre exchanged glances. They had to admit that Tony's words made sense. I understand. Paul hesitated for a while and finally nodded. You're right. If the god of disobedience appears, we still need to deal with it. Only the king can fight against the god, so it's not strange for us to collect information for you. As long as you don't mess around. Erica said bluntly. I'm just afraid that you can't wait and really do something to make the god of disobedience appear. Doni was taken aback and muttered to himself. Seeing this scene, Erica, Paul, Andre, and the others felt a chill in their hearts. Noah, who had been watching from the sidelines, could only express his understanding of the three's reaction. After all, this Doni seemed like he was really considering whether to take the initiative to lure out the god of disobedience, wasn't it? Andre, Tony's trusted aide, who acted as a supervisor to prevent Doni from messing around, was about to say something when Doni spoke first. All in all, it's right for you to collect information on the god. When those who are late arrive, let them collect as well. Until then, I'll be waiting here. Hearing this, everyone was surprised. Wait? The King of Swords who could stir up chaos in Italy for the sake of battle was actually willing to wait? You didn't come here for this purpose, did you? Is it necessary to do this? Noah couldn't help but ask. Mr. Paul also said that only the God Slayer can deal with the god. When the god of disobedience appears, they will definitely report it to you. Why are you in a hurry to collect information on the god? Isn't that obvious? Doni replied without hesitation. Of course it's for you. As soon as these words came out, everyone was startled. For me? Noah looked at Doni in astonishment. Why? Do you still need to ask? Doni said with a smile. This god is not for me, but for you. Everyone suddenly fell silent. Ahem. Andre coughed, pushed his glasses, and pretended to be calm as he asked. If I understand correctly, Salbole, you want His Excellency Noah to slay the god? Paul and Erica also cast their gazes on Doni with absurd emotions in their eyes. Sigh. Noah sighed and said to Doni tiredly. Just tell me what you're thinking. My friend, didn't I say before that I only wanted to fight with you with all my might? Doni said matter-of-factly. But my authority is a bit of a cheat. It's not fair to you at all. So? Noah had a guess in his heart that made him speechless. You brought me here because you want me to kill a god and become a god slayer like you. This way, the conditions between us will be equal, and you will be able to do your best, right? Oh. 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 Doni cried happily. You're indeed my best friend. You really know me. Doni's so-called plan was finally exposed. He actually wanted to train a god slayer with his own hands. How preposterous. Noah, who had fallen silent, suddenly turned around and punched Doni's abdomen heavily. Bang! Doni, who did not expect Noah to suddenly attack, was hit squarely by the punch. His eyes bulged, and he squatted down while clutching his abdomen. This time, not to mention Paul and Andre, even Erica opened her mouth in shock and looked at Noah in disbelief. He had actually punched a god-slaying monarch? Sorry, I couldn't help it, Noah said expressionlessly, turned around, and walked out of the room without hesitation. Wait. Wait. My best friend. Doni clutched his abdomen and chased after Shi-Yen with a twisted face. In the vast and luxurious room, only Erica, Paul, and Andre were left looking at each other. Their eyes were constantly communicating, and they could not speak for a long time. However, each of them had the same thought in their mind. This time, there would be a lot of trouble because of that idiot. Chapter 462. As the largest hotel in the Italian capital, Rome, although the people here did not have the habit of sharing baths, there were still large baths. Splash, with the sound of water splashing, Noah lay down in the water and leaned back. He rubbed his temples and sighed. On the other side of Noah, a chuckling, frivolous voice sounded. I knew you wouldn't want to leave me. These words sounded like words of love from someone who was very infatuated with Noah. It was a pity that the person who said that wasn't a beauty or even a woman. Instead, it was a man who made Noah wish he could slash him to death with his sword. You and I are best friends who have crossed swords. Even I feel like I'm cheating. You must be unwilling to lose to me in terms of authority, right? Tony, who was soaking in the hot water like Noah, said with a proud expression. As a swordsman, this is the time for you to work hard and become stronger. Then, you can seek revenge on me and defeat me with your sword once again. This is the true path of a king. For example, you can kill a god or something like that. My dear friend, I believe you can understand. Noah squinted his dead fish eyes at Tony, who was constantly trying to persuade him to kill a god. For the first time, he had the thought of kneeling down and surrendering to someone. At first, Noah wanted to sneak out of the hotel and leave. Who would have thought that Tony, who couldn't find Noah, would be so anxious that he would pull out his sword and use silver hand of shredding in an attempt to cut the entire hotel in half, which scared Noah out of his hiding place. When Noah asked Tony why he pulled out his sword, Tony said this. There are too many obstacles in this building. I don't know any magic, so it won't be easy to find someone. So if I cut down the whole hotel, it should be easier to find him. Noah almost knelt down. Just because you want to find someone, you want to destroy a hotel? Even if you have no common sense, there should be a limit, right? Or is this the only way Tony can think of? In the end, Noah came to a conclusion in both aspects. So, Noah gave up on escaping. Who knows if this idiot will cut the whole Rome in half in order to find Noah? Moreover, all the magic associations in Italy respected Doni as their leader. As long as Doni gave the order, all of Italy would begin to hunt down Noah. Noah didn't want to make such a big deal out of it. Therefore, Noah had lost because he was competing with an idiot. That was not wise at all. In short, Noah felt that dealing with Tony was more tiring than dealing with Naz. At the very least, if Naz couldn't control it, he could directly silence him with a punch. But Donnie was many levels stronger than Naz. Even Noah was defeated by his authority of the God Slayer. What else could he do? I have prepared the conditions for you, my dear friend. As long as there is news of God, you can go to the battlefield to kill the enemy and become one of my kind. Tony was getting more and more excited. At that time, we will fight each other with power against power, sword against sword. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I say, you should let me go now, right? Noah felt that he might really cry, and his tone was extremely weak. Let's not talk about beautiful or not. Tony, do you really believe that I can kill God? Was God so easy to kill? If so, there would be more than 6 God Slayers in the world. At least, Noah was not as optimistic as Tony. He really thought that he could kill God. If you want to kill God, you can't just have power. From Andre, Noah also learned about the current situation of the 6 God Slayers. According to Andre, apart from 2 to 3 people, almost half of the God Slayers were just ordinary people before they became God Slayers. It was said that before Tony became a God Slayer, he only knew how to use a sword and nothing else. Not only did he not know magic, but Tony's body could not even store curses. Killing God depended entirely on luck and miracles. Otherwise, he would have been able to seal the weakest god and not kill him. To be honest, Noah did not think that he was weaker than the weakest god, but defeating and killing were 2 completely different concepts. Therefore, even if Noah was confident in his own strength, he did not dare to say that he could definitely kill God. Compared to Noah, Tony was obviously more confident. Tony squinted his bright eyes and met Noah's gaze. What appeared in his eyes wasn't trust or suspicion. Instead, it was excitement, as though he had met his match. I believe that you will become one of my kind. Hearing this, Noah frowned. What makes you say that? Who knows? Tony shrugged irresponsibly. At the very least, I don't feel that you can't do it. My intuition tells me that you can do it. Noah fell silent at Tony's words. Although Noah did not know whether Tony was joking or not, to be honest, he did not feel that he could not do it. Noah's intuition was very accurate. Since Noah himself did not feel that he could not do it, then it was most likely that he could do it. I'm afraid that Tony also has amazing intuition, right? Noah did not know whether it was Tony's own talent or a talent he gained after becoming a God Slayer. However, since Tony had said so, only he knew whether it was ridiculous or not. In fact, Noah was not uninterested in meeting the so-called gods of this world. After coming to this world, Noah not only needed to find a world fragment, he also needed to find a way to strengthen himself. The person who slays a god can seize the divine power of the god he slays and become a God Slayer. Without a doubt, if Noah could succeed in slaying a god, then he would obtain the power called authority and become a God Slayer. Noah's strength would definitely increase by several folds. As long as Hades was as strong as Tony, he wouldn't have to be afraid of him anymore. Tony did not know if he saw Noah's wavering heart, but he laughed in a relaxed manner. I know, Noah. If you hadn't fainted that day, you would have been able to bring out an even more shocking power. Tony stretched out his hand and grasped his sword in his hand, truly demonstrating the state of a man and sword are inseparable. Even so, I don't feel like I'll lose to you. If that's the case, then I won't lose. After all, other than the authority of the demonic sword, I still have 3 other authorities that I haven't used yet. Tony said in an intoxicated tone as he gently stroked the blade of his sword. If that's the case, then you won't be able to satisfy me. You have to become stronger, or even become one of my kind. As soon as he finished speaking, Tony pointed his sword at Noah, causing Noah to feel a chill in his heart. Anyone who can become a God Slayer is destined to become an excellent warrior, and I believe that you are an excellent warrior. Tony's lips curled into a sinister arc. So, my friend, do you really not have the slightest thought of seeking revenge from me? Noah sighed under Tony's piercing gaze. No. How could that be possible? Although the battle with Tony wasn't a battle to the death, Noah had to use all of his skills to barely block Tony's sword. Ever since he learned magic, Noah had never lost so miserably. Under such circumstances, even Noah wouldn't believe that he didn't want to take revenge. If possible, Noah really wanted to fight with Tony again. Fight with all his strength. Then, defeat Tony. But as Tony said, with Noah's current strength, it was impossible for him to win. Apart from the authority of the demonic sword, Tony still had 3 other authorities that he hadn't used yet. The gap between Noah and Tony was too big. At least, it wasn't just big. If he wanted to defeat Tony, there was only one way. God Slayer. Usurp the authority of a god and become a God Slayer. This way, Noah would have a chance to defeat Tony. At this moment, Noah bitterly smiled. You won, Tony smiled from the bottom of his heart. It was a blessing for his kind that was about to be born. Chapter 463. Just like that, 3 days passed. On the way back to his room, Noah touched his arm while frowning and hissing in pain. If one were to look closely, they would notice that there was a tear on Noah's arm. Blood was still dripping from it, but there was no wound. No, it should be said that the original wound had already healed under Noah's regenerative ability that was strengthened countless times by the protozoan virus. All that was left were the cracks in his clothes, traces of blood, and some residual pain on his body. Of course, if it was just an ordinary injury, the degree of a cut on the arm would not be enough to make Noah show pain. The reason why he was still like this was mainly because the sword that cut Noah was not an ordinary sword. Noah gritted his teeth when he recalled the scene of Tony using the lacerating silver hand, with a cheerful expression and swinging the sword at him with a sunny smile on his face. That hateful guy. Once he enters battle mode, he can't hold back at all. He doesn't know how to hold back at all. 3 days ago, under Tony's persuasion, Noah finally decided to slay a god. Since he had decided to fight against a terrifying opponent who could rival Tony, Noah naturally had to make more preparations. Instead of saying that it was preparation, in fact, Noah just asked Tony to order a gymnasium around the hotel to be reserved, and then asked Tony to accompany him for training. Noah did this not because he wanted to make a last-minute effort, but because he wanted to get used to fighting against opponents of the level of the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience. When a person stayed in a dark place for a long time, their eyes would gradually adapt to the darkness. When a person stayed in a warm place for a long time, their body would gradually adapt to the high temperature. It was the same principle. If Noah were to fight against a high-level opponent like Tony, he would be able to adapt to the battle rhythm of the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience. Thus, he would be able to better display his strength. As it turned out, this method was indeed effective. The long-distance slash that Tony used with the demon sword's authority could not be blocked, nor could it be seen with the naked eye. Although Noah's senses could detect Tony's long-range slash, Tony's slash was too fast. Even if he could detect it, Noah's body would not be able to keep up. This was also the reason why Noah had no choice but to block Tony's demon sword, even though he knew it would be terrible if he chose to block it. Instead, he relied on Bio to withstand Tony's demon sword. And now, after 3 days of training with Tony, Noah was gradually able to adapt to the speed of Tony's demonic sword and dodge it. But even so, accidents still happen sometimes. Noah's arm was injured because he was a little slow to react in the gymnasium just now. As a result, he was grazed by Tony's magic sword. With that, Noah's arm was split open with a large wound. An unstoppable demonic sword was not just for show. It seems that in addition to increasing the attack range and non-stop attacks, Tony's demonic sword can also make injuries more difficult to heal and aggravate the pain. Noah nodded as he wiped the blood off his arm. There are strong and weak gods, and naturally, there are strong and weak authority. Tony's demonic sword, authority, is one of the best among all the God Slayers and the God of Disobedience. If I can adapt to that kind of slash, I'll have a better chance against the God of Disobedience. I just don't know what kind of God Tony will find. Noah shook his head helplessly. I hope it's not the kind of god of disobedience that has troublesome authority. At this moment, a voice sounded behind Noah. Ah, isn't this Lord Noah? It was not so much a sweet voice, but rather a voice that purposely emphasized elegance and confidence. The moment he heard this voice, Noah knew who it was. He turned his head and looked behind him. What entered his sight was the person Noah had expected. She had long golden hair that reached her waist like a crown. She was a little short in height, but her figure was extremely large. Like a noble lady, she was walking out of the elevator. Her walking posture was very proper and majestic, attracting the attention of the people around her all the time. The Grand Knight of the Red Copper Black Cross, Erica Brantery. Beside this girl who had always emphasized her elegance was another girl. It was a girl who reminded people of a fairy. Her appearance was delicate and proper, but her expression was extremely tense. She gave people a feeling of cuteness and majesty at the same time. The girl tied her long silver hair into a ponytail and let it hang behind her. As she walked, it swayed like a tail. Together with Erica, she gradually approached Noah. Looking at this unfamiliar girl, Noah stopped walking and allowed Erica and the silver-haired fairy girl to walk in front of him. However, as soon as she arrived in front of Noah, the silver-haired girl clearly sized up Noah with a scrutinizing gaze. After a while, she suddenly opened her mouth. After a while, she suddenly said, "Are you Lord Noah Dole?" The girl's tone was the kind that would make people feel that she was too rigid and stern. Noah often encountered such a tone from people like Alusha and Orange Bar, so he nodded with ease. "You are? Excuse me. As a knight, I should first report my name." The silver-haired girl clenched her right fist and placed it in front of her left chest. She bowed slightly to Noah and saluted. "Greetings from the Red Copper Black Cross, Liliana Kranikar." Liliana Kranikar? Noah seemed to have heard this name from somewhere. "I remember, it seems to be related to a genius child who obtained the glory of a grand knight before she reached adulthood, just like me, Erica Brantley." Without giving Noah a chance to recall, Erica laughed out loud. "In the whole of Italy, the only person of the same age who can make me, Erica Brantley, acknowledge is Liliana. Don't forget it." Hearing Erica's words, Noah remembered. In the past few days, Noah also learned a lot about the European magic world from Andre and Paul. Among them, Erica and Liliana were the focus of attention. As for why, the reason was very simple. This was because both Erica and Liliana were not yet 16 years old, but they had both obtained the rank of Grand Knight, which could only be obtained by the most outstanding elites among the knights. There were only 2 people in the whole of Italy who could achieve this at this age. Erica Brantley. Liliana Kranikar. Only these 2 girls. "I'm really surprised," Noah couldn't help but say. "You 2 are actually together?" Noah heard that the 2 magic associations, Red Bronze Black Cross and Red Bronze Black Cross, seemed to be in a hostile relationship. He didn't expect that the treasures of the 2 magic associations would actually be together. "Liliana is my acknowledged competitor, how can I let her appear out of my sight?" Erica spread out her hands and revealed an inside story. "Not to mention, Liliana is my childhood sweetheart. Don't call me that intimately, you vixen." Liliana couldn't help but burst out swearing. "I don't have such a good relationship with you, it's just an ill-fated relationship." Saying such a sentence, Liliana deliberately coughed to make herself serious and looked at Noah. "I just want to see what kind of man is rumored to be able to withstand the magic sword of Salba Lechine." Hearing this, Noah was speechless. He didn't know when it started, but the story of Noah withstanding Tony's magic sword completely spread in the past 3 days. This also led to the heads of various magic associations from all over Italy looking at Noah with amazement, surprise, horror, and sometimes even horror. Not many people dared to come up and greet Noah. As Andre said, Noah had completely become a celebrity. Under such circumstances, Noah could only answer, "You came to me because of this?" "No, this is just by the way." Liliana's expression became more serious. I came here to inform your excellency that there is news of God. Chapter 464. In a room on the top floor of the hotel, Tony sat cross-legged on the sofa, holding his sword and wiping it constantly. It was apparent that he was in a good mood. In front of Tony, Paul and Andre were also sitting on the sofa, but they seemed to be trying their best to persuade Tony. However, due to Tony's disregard, they seemed to be on the verge of tears. A hint of anger even appeared in Andre's eyes, and he was on the verge of exploding. But even so, Tony wasn't moved at all. He continued to wipe his sword and hummed a tune, completely ignoring Paul's and Andre's words. Katja, with the slight sound of the door opening, Noah walked into the room, instantly attracting the attention of everyone in the room. "Yo, Noah, you're here?" Upon sight of Noah, Tony's sloppy attitude disappeared instantly. He gazed at Noah with a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. "Your prey is here." Erica and Liliana followed Noah here. At this moment, Liliana took a step forward and asked Tony in a respectful and questioning manner. "Pardon me for being blunt, Salvatore. Even though I've heard about this matter, do you really intend to let an ordinary person slay a deity?" "Lily, I think you'd better give up," Erica said with a vexed expression, which was rare of her. "How much time do you think we've spent on Salvatore in the past 3 days?" But Salvatore hasn't changed her mind. This can't be described as unscrupulous anymore, right? Liliana was speechless for a moment before turning to Andre. "Andre, do you think this is all right too?" Just like Miss Erica said, how much effort do you think I've spent on this stupid king in the past 3 days? Andre sighed tiredly. But Salvatore has no intention of compromising at all. We have no other choice. Your Excellency Noah. Even Paul turned to Noah and asked. "Do you think this is all right too?" Everyone's eyes were focused on Noah. In the past 3 days, Noah's deeds had already spread throughout the magic societies in Italy. Now, as long as it was a magic association that belonged to Italy, they would definitely know that a man named Noah Doria had blocked the magic sword of the leader of Italy, the King of Swords, with his human body. To put it bluntly, even if this incident wasn't enough to be recorded in the history books, it was enough to attract the attention of the entire magic world. I believe that in the current Italy, there shouldn't be anyone who would feel that Noah is inferior to those who have the highest honor of the Holy Knight rank, right? Even so, it was still too irrational to challenge a god. After all, even if it were those who could be said to be the pinnacle of humanity, if they were to challenge the gods, it would be fine to seal those weak gods, but if they wanted to kill the gods, it would only be a daydream. Unless a miracle happened. Such a miracle had only happened 6 times in the past few hundred years, resulting in the birth of 6 godslayers. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be. No one doubted Noah's strength. But killing a god wasn't something that could be done with strength. Therefore, almost no one thought that Noah could succeed. It all depended on whether Noah himself had such an understanding. Unfortunately, Noah had already made a decision. "Everyone, you don't have to say any more. Just think of me as the kind of stupid person who overestimates himself and wants to challenge a god." Noah gave his answer tactfully. "If I fail, you can just let your alliance leader step in." Well, before I became a godslayer, I was much weaker than Noah. Tony waved his hand impatiently. "He's an opponent that I acknowledge. How can he lose to a mere god of disobedience? ? Hearing this sentence, whether it was Erica, who valued beauty, Paul, who had the identity of the commander-in-chief, or even Liliana and Andre, they all cursed in their hearts. A mere god of disobedience? Not many godslayers would dare to say that, right? However, that was what Tony said. It wasn't because Tony was so strong that he could trample on the god of disobedience like an ant. It was just that Tony was talking nonsense with his own subjective impression. Compared to the god of disobedience, Tony obviously paid more attention to the so-called opponent, Noah, which was why he said so. Perhaps, in Tony's heart, he had already determined that Noah couldn't fail, right? Should I say that he's really an idiot? Since even Sir Noah said so, it's useless for us to object. Paul shook his head and looked at Tony. We only hope that if Sir Noah fails, you can immediately rush over and deal with the God of disobedience, who brought disaster to the people. Don't worry. Tony smiled confidently. There's no need for that. Looking at Tony, who had no intention of changing his mind, everyone could only smile bitterly. To be honest, Tony might really believe that Noah could successfully kill a god more than Noah himself. Noah shook his head with a smile and looked straight at Paul. So, Mr. Paul, did the God of disobedience really appear? Yes. Although the place where it appeared was far from Rome, we still received the report. Paul finally became serious when it came to business. In the past, magic societies like us that were far away from the place where the God of disobedience appeared could only passively wait for the God of disobedience to cause trouble. But this time, because of your request, we were lucky enough to collect the information in advance. Just this morning, the Bronze Cross also received the same secret report. Perhaps because the society she belonged to was hostile to Paul, Liliana was not willing to be outdone. It is said that the god that appeared this time seems to have the appearance of the god of youth, and it hasn't caused any trouble yet. It seems like it's looking for something. God of youth? Noah and Tony looked at each other. Gods were originally born in myths. Whatever form they had in myths, they would generally be in that form. And there were many gods in myths that appeared in the form of youth. The god of youth who seems to be looking for something? Noah pondered for a while before asking. Do you know what god it is? We haven't found out its real name yet. It was Erica who answered this question. Erica looked at Noah with a curious and provocative gaze and shrugged very casually. However, there is information that someone has witnessed the god of youth turning into a gust of wind and disappearing. So, the other party should be a god related to the wind, right? Wind? Noah frowned at first, but then he relaxed his brows. Is there any other information? This god that appears in the form of a youth will only appear in some ruins and seaside. Paul sighed aloud. There hasn't been any trouble yet. It should be because this god is still looking for something, and he hasn't found it yet. If he finds it, then it won't be so peaceful anymore. In other words, is this the calm before the storm? Tony couldn't help but clench his sword. His eyes gradually became bright, but his expression was very conflicted. I really want to go and meet this god, but it's Noah's prey. Ching, are you really not going to think about it? Erica seized the opportunity and said in a tempting tone. Maybe it's a very powerful god. Liliana, Paul, and Andre also looked at Tony expectantly. No one wanted to see the battle between the god slayer and the god of disobedience because every battle meant that there would be a price to pay. For example, the collapse of a building under a powerful force was a common occurrence. However, instead of letting the layman deal with the god, everyone present was obviously more willing to see Tony take action. You don't have to persuade me. Don't look at me like this. I'm very righteous. Tony curled his lips. So, where is the god of disobedience now? Sardinia. Paul said. The god that appeared is in Sardinia. As soon as this sentence came out, Noah, Tony, and Andre were all stunned. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They were in Sardinia 3 days ago. Chapter 465. Sardinia. Returning to this island again after 3 days, Noah actually had a feeling that things were still the same, but the people had changed. Standing on the busy street, Noah recalled that he had met a god slayer in less than an hour after coming to this world 3 days ago. He had even fought with the god slayer. Now, 3 days later, he had even decided to kill a god. Noah sighed in his heart. Who would have thought that he would encounter so many things as soon as he came to this world? Not to mention, in such a world, there were the so-called godslayers and disobedient gods. I've really come to an incredible world. After leaving such a murmur that only he could hear, Noah lifted his feet and walked forward. Around him, on the streets that were filled with people, regardless of whether they were men, women, old or young, all of them cast their gazes in Noah's direction the moment he passed by. Their eyes were filled with amazement. Of course, this amazement was not directed at Noah, but at the two girls beside Noah. Her long golden hair and silver hair shone brightly under the light of the setting sun, even giving off a feeling of sparkling light. Erica and Liliana walked to Noah's left and right and chatted with each other. "Lily, we are now on a holiday island. Why don't you relax a little and let yourself relax?" Erica Brantley, although I know that the more important the time, the more you like to use a relaxed attitude to show your ease, at such an important moment, I really hate your pretentiousness. Have you forgotten what we are here for? You are still the same. Once you are in a bad mood, you will speak without thinking. You are always so serious, which will scare away the gentlemen who come to chat with you. I'll say it again, we are not here for a holiday, Erica. If you like to play, then play by yourself. I hope you will not disturb me. Alas, you are so rigid that you have become a poor woman who likes to fantasize about some incredible plots. I am not that kind of person. Your attitude explains everything, Lily. Tisk. You vixen. You like to play with me since I was a child. You won't let me go until now? Because Lily's reaction is really interesting, isn't it? One day, I will definitely kill you. Erica and Liliana never stopped talking like this from leaving Rome to taking the plane, from getting off the plane to entering the street. The two young ladies, who were like the sun and the moon, had dazzling golden hair and soft silver hair respectively. They accompanied Noah as if it was only natural for them to do so. The surrounding people's gazes were all focused on the two young ladies. The golden and silver young ladies seemed to have gotten used to it. They didn't mind it at all and continued to bicker while following Noah closely. Noah couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Why did you two come with me? Noah was just talking to himself. Noah had already guessed the reason. As expected, Liliana gave a serious answer. Since you don't intend to take action, it is our responsibility to stop the disaster brought by the God of disobedience. As a knight, be it me or the Bronze Cross, we have the obligation to face it. Compared to Liliana's serious reason, Electra's explanation was a little strange. Even you, who came out of nowhere, can replace Salbalay to face the god. If I, Erica Brantley, can't show my bravery, that will be the most humiliating thing. Although Noah said that, he knew that there was another reason for these two girls to come with him. And that was to supervise Noah. To be more precise, they were here to witness the entire process of Noah challenging the god. If Noah failed, Erica and Liliana would immediately report this matter to the Bronze Cross and a Bronze Cross so that Tony, who was on standby in Rome, could rush over to clean up the mess and avoid causing more trouble. And if Noah was lucky enough to succeed, then the birth of the world's seventh king who killed a god would be a big deal, more important than the appearance of the god of disobedience. Naturally, they would need to bring back the information in this regard truthfully. After all, as the demon king that humans could not challenge, the birth of every god slayer meant that the world had one more atomic bomb that could explode at any time. Therefore, the birth of a god slayer had always been the most concerned issue in the world. In this regard, even the god of disobedience was not as important as the god slayer. That was why Erica and Liliana came with Noah, right? Of course, Erica and Liliana's reason was also one of the reasons. There was no doubt about it. Forget it. It's up to you, as long as you think it's okay, Noah paused and said as if nothing had happened. However, since you've followed me here, should I treat you as my competitors? Or should I treat you as my companions? We don't mean to disagree with you, Liliana said without hesitation. Since we're here to solve the problem of the god of disobedience, helping the people here to solve their problems is our consensus, so I'll help you. Or rather, whether we're competitors or companions, don't you think it's a good thing to let these two relationships coexist? Erica suddenly smiled in a noble manner. Just as Lily said, we're all here to solve the problem of the god of disobedience, so we should be companions. But in the process, we can show each other our talents and see who's better. Isn't that a wonderful thing? In other words, Noah glanced at Erica and Liliana. It doesn't matter if we're companions or not. You're not the kind of people who would stab me in the back at a critical moment, right? Of course. Liliana frowned. Noah Dole, do you think a knight like me would do such a despicable thing? You can't pretend that you didn't hear that. The smile on Erica's face gradually changed. If it's a duel, it should be fair and square. If you force that kind of undignified method on me, I'll take it as an insult to me. Don't be nervous. I'm just making sure. Noah spread his hands and patted his cheeks. So, where should we go next? Seeing that Noah changed the topic, Erica and Liliana didn't want to continue the conversation. They looked at each other and turned their gazes to Noah, who was walking in the middle. The god that appeared on this island appeared in the form of a young man named Wind Follower. He has also been to some ruins on this island, Erica replied. We don't know where that young god is now. Because he can transform into Wind Follower, our helpers on this island have long lost track of him. That's why we have to find God first, Liliana said in a serious tone. That God seems to have been to some ruins. Our destination is there. If I'm lucky, I might be able to find out where that God went through spirit vision. Hearing this, Noah felt relieved. Noah had more or less heard about spirit vision. It was said that it was a special ability that could decipher the mysteries of the world. Sometimes, it could even more or less see the future. There was no doubt that this ability had a lot of limitations. First of all, it had to be possessed by someone with a special constitution. Secondly, spirit vision wasn't something that could be activated at will. There was a certain probability of it happening. Therefore, if someone with the ability of spirit vision wanted to decipher any mystery, they would generally try their best to come into contact with this mystery. This could increase the probability of triggering spirit vision. Of course, there was another point. The number of things that could be seen by spirit vision depended on the aptitude of the person with the ability of spirit vision. In addition, it also needed to be random. Liliana had this ability. If Liliana went to the place where the god had been before, it was still possible for her to see the god's whereabouts. Thinking of this, Noah made a decision. Then, let's go. Chapter 466. Not long after, night came to Sardinia. For the resort island, night was also a lively time. Therefore, the streets were still crowded. Not only did the number of people not decrease, but it also gradually increased. However, this was no big deal to Noah, Erica, and Liliana, who had walked out of the streets. Perhaps it was because they had been to Sardinia before, or because they had made all the necessary preparations before departure. Erica and Liliana took Noah in a straightforward manner. They took a car and walked. Finally, when it was dark, they arrived in front of a ruin. This was a very dilapidated ruin. Whether it was the walls, stone pillars, or the ground, they all had an ancient aura and a dilapidated appearance. For example, although some walls were carved with many strange patterns, only half of them were left. For example, the stone pillar was directly broken at the waist, and the other half was horizontal between the ground and the stone pillar. Another example was that the ground was also cracked, as if something had broken out of the ground. There was no value in keeping such a ruin. However, the residents of Sardinia seemed to think that it would be bad to tear it down, so they left it here, unused. The god that appeared on this island seems to be looking for something. Erica repeated this sentence that she had heard countless times as she looked around. But, would the thing that the god is looking for be in a place like this? The older a place is, the more secrets it must hide. The cleansing of history is not just a saying. Noah came to a broken stone pillar, reached out his hand, and gently stroked the rough surface of the pillar. However, that god obviously didn't find what he was looking for, which is why he's still wandering. He hasn't caused any trouble, right? To humans, the god of disobedience was like a ferocious beast running into the streets. There was no need to mention the danger. After all, the god of disobedience was a god of the opposite path. This kind of god generally had two characteristics. 1. Paranoia. Because they did not have desires like humans, the god of disobedience would carry out their instincts and duties in an extremely paranoid and crazy way. For example, if a god of war became the god of disobedience, then in order to be able to fight, he would do anything at all costs, including destroying all of humanity. And if the god of disobedience that appeared was the kind of divinity that spread death and plague, then the other party would take this responsibility as the meaning of life and would not hesitate to turn all the places he passed into hell and death. 2. Unscrupulous. To gods, human lives were like beasts. Even if they killed them, they would not feel any guilt. Just like how humans killed birds, if necessary, the god of disobedience would not hesitate because of human lives. If a hornet's nest in a person's home, he would do his best to get rid of it. Gods were the same. Once God thought that humans were in his way, he would not hesitate to eradicate all humans in his sight. Even if they looked similar, gods and humans, they were. Therefore, just as humans could slaughter chickens, ducks, and geese without any guilt, human lives were no different from chickens, ducks, and geese to God. Therefore, once the god of disobedience with such values appeared, it would definitely cause trouble. For this reason, the magic societies in all corners of the world had the obligation to treat the god of disobedience as an enemy in order to protect themselves and others. Not to mention, the existence of gods would also cause all kinds of trouble, which would indirectly affect the world. Now, the god who could turn into a youth and wind had not caused any trouble for the time being because he was looking for something. However, once he found what he wanted, he would not be able to remain calm. Like Noah and Erica, Liliana was also in the ruins. The girl swayed her silver ponytail, constantly wandering around the ruins and doing all kinds of things. Sometimes she touched the stone wall. Sometimes she put her face on the stone pillar. Sometimes she just lay on the ground and closed her eyes. Sometimes she seemed to be absent-minded, as if she was being pulled by invisible strings, walking back and forth. Seeing Liliana like this, Noah and Erica both kept their mouths shut and did not disturb her. Under such circumstances, Liliana arrived in front of a stone wall at an unknown time. Her pupils suddenly lost focus, but her eyes lit up with a dim light. Youth. Wind. Guardian of the crown. Sun. At the sight of this, Noah and Erica's spirits were lifted at the same time. They quietly came to Liliana's back and watched her silently. Walk, to seek victory, and also to seek defeat, Liliana kept murmuring as if in a dream. After a while, the light in her eyes began to dissipate. Her slackened pupils gradually condensed, and her expression became relatively bright. Oh. Erica smiled elegantly. It seems that Lily has discovered something. How is it? Noah asked directly. Did you see anything? Liliana nodded heavily, but her expression became a little distressed. But that's not good news. Hearing this, Noah and Erica looked at each other and nodded. Let's find a hotel first. Noah made a decision decisively. Anyway, it's impossible to find that god today. Let's rest while sorting out the information we got. Liliana hesitated for a moment but did not object. She nodded in agreement. Just like that, a man and two women walked out of the ruins. On a holiday island like Sardinia, not only were there small stalls and canteens, but there were also high-end restaurants. Noah had only been in this world for less than 4 to 5 days. During these 4 to 5 days, he had been dragged around by Donnie. Naturally, he did not have the money of this world. However, as prodigies of the Copper Black Cross and the Bronze Black Cross, one of the most famous magic societies in Italy, Erica and Liliana were not short of money. Therefore, under Erica's suggestion, the three chose a hotel with a high-end restaurant. They first ordered food, then listened to Liliana's explanation while filling their stomachs. My spirit vision did see that great existence. Liliana began to explain with a serious expression. That's a god of war for victory. No, it should be said that he himself represents victory and the guardian of the king and the people, the trusted aid of the sun, the undefeated ancient Persian god of war. The god of victory? Or the guardian of the king and the people? The trusted aid of the sun and the ancient Persian god of war? Erica was stunned when she heard Liliana say such words. Hey, Lily, could that god be? It should be what you think. Liliana sighed. I only saw some fragments, but it's not difficult to guess that person's identity. That's true. Erica frowned and became distressed. After all, that god is very famous. What are you talking about? Noah said unhappily. Unlike you magicians who have learned about gods since young in order to deal with gods, I don't know much about gods. Who are you talking about? We're talking about the ancient Persian god of war, the guardian of the god of light, Mitra. Since Mitra is the incarnation of the sun, this god also has a deep relationship with the sun, Liliana explained. He's the invincible god of war with 10 incarnations. In West Asia, he's known as the guardian of light. He has the same origin as India's Thunder Emperor Indra. Not only is he a god of victory, but he's also the guardian of the king and the people. Velaslana. Erica finally said the name of that god. Because he's the Persian god of war, you might not know much about him, but this god of victory is no ordinary god. In the myths, he's an undefeated god. Hearing this, Noah frowned. A god of victory? Didn't that mean that if Noah wanted to slay a god, it was equivalent to doing something that no man or god in the myths could do? Was it that difficult? That might be the worst god for you. Liliana seemed to understand Noah's thoughts, but she revealed another piece of news. The most troublesome thing is that now, this god is preparing to summon another god. Chapter 467. Summoning another god? Noah and Erica were both stunned and surprised. My spirit vision did capture it. The ancient Persian god of war is looking for the god sleeping on this island. Liliana's tone was a little heavy. It is precisely because he wants to wake up the god sleeping on this island that the god of war has been wandering around the various ruins of Sardinia. Because he wants to wake up the god, he also left his own curse power in those ruins. That's why I was able to successfully trigger spirit vision. In other words, the reason why the god hasn't made a fuss until now is not because he doesn't want to, but because he wants to make a fuss? Noah said in surprise. Is there no way for humans to satisfy him at this level? If you think about it carefully, it might be possible. Erica frowned deeply. The ancient Persian god of war is known to be invincible. Now that he has become a rebellious god of disobedience, it's not strange that he wants to find an opponent who can fight with him. Fortunately, Sarbatrem, who stayed on this island not long ago, has already left. Otherwise, Velaslana's target wouldn't be the god sleeping on this island, but the deicide, Liliana said with a troubled expression on her face. One god is troublesome enough. If Velaslana wakes up another god, it will be really bad. Hey, Lily. Erica seemed to have thought of something and suddenly changed the topic. You said that Velaslana is trying to awaken the god sleeping on this island, but in the myths, there is only one god who can rival the god of victory and has a deep relationship with this island. Isn't there only one god? Although I don't want to admit it, my thoughts are the same as yours. Liliana sighed. To be able to catch the eye of the god of war and have a deep relationship with this island, if I'm not wrong, it should be Mekhl. As soon as this was said, the man and two women, including Noah, fell silent. Noah was not very familiar with Velaslana, the god of war from ancient Persia. However, Noah had heard of Mekhl's words before. Or rather, he had read about it in a book. He was the hero god in Canaan mythology. He was the god of the city in the Phoenician port city of Tyre. He was equivalent to Hercules and the patron god of the voyagers, Maricourts. Tyre was a city built by the Phoenicians. It was also the home port of the Phoenicians, the tyrants of the ancient Mediterranean. However, the Phoenicians were once the rulers of Sardinia. Therefore, the god that the Phoenicians believed in, Mekhl, became the god that had a deep affinity with Sardinia. Mekhl was a god-king who possessed the attributes of wind, lightning, sky, and so on. There were also gods like Zeus and Odin, who were well known as the highest gods. There was no doubt that they were the highest gods. Now, the invincible war god of ancient Persia was planning to awaken the divine king who could rival him in battle. That would be a disaster for humans. Noah, Erica, and Liliana did not doubt that if the two famous gods were to fight, it was absolutely possible that the entire Sardinia would be affected and sunk. The invincible war god and the highest divine king. Noah felt his head start to hurt. Do we have to make it so difficult? No, it's too early to make a conclusion. Erica shook her head. Lana hasn't awakened Mekhl yet. Things haven't reached the worst point yet. We still have a way to stop it. The problem is that if we want to stop the war god, there is no doubt that we will have to clash head-on with him. Liliana confirmed with Noah worriedly. Are you sure you can do it? Without Tony's help, Erica and Liliana could only rely on Noah. After all, Noah was the one who really had to deal with the god of disobedience. However, the gods that appeared this time were not ordinary. One of them was the undefeated war god, and the other one had yet to appear, but once he did, he would be at the highest level. He was definitely not below Lana, the god king. Dealing with these two gods, even if Tony, the god slayer, came, there was a high chance that he would be defeated. And Noah was just an ordinary person. No, it was a bit too much to say that he was an ordinary person. Noah could withstand Tony's magical sword unscathed, and he was stronger than many of the so-called paladins who stood at the peak of humans in this world. But he was still human after all. Want to fight with the gods? It was not impossible, but it was a matter of whether he could do it in the end. Under Erica and Liliana's gazes, Noah curled his lips into a smile. You know what? A man can't say no. Without giving Erica and Liliana a chance to react, Noah turned his head and asked Liliana. Do you know where Lana is now? As for the specific location, I don't know now. Liliana was startled at first, but then she answered reflexively. However, the war god's purpose is to awaken the divine king, Mekhl. As long as he moves, he will definitely emit fluctuations of spell power. I have already used spirit vision to capture Lana once in that ruin, so as long as he gathers his spell power again, I will sense it. Then there's no problem. Noah's expression relaxed. Let's find Lana first, and then we'll act according to the situation. With that, Noah stood up and said to Erica and Liliana, who were still in a daze, don't worry. It's getting late, and it's time to rest. Tomorrow will be very busy. After saying this, Noah went straight to the counter. Wait. Wait. Erica and Liliana woke up and quickly stood up and chased after him. The next day, early morning, today, Noah woke up early in the morning. He got up when the sun had just risen. After washing up, Noah walked out of the hotel and looked at the deserted street. After a while, his eyes fixed on a vast square next to the hotel. Yesterday, when Noah, Erica, and Liliana came to this hotel, this vast square was already filled with all kinds of stalls. But now, the sun had just risen, and there were not many people on the street. Naturally, there would not be any stalls in this square. And this square just happened to be Noah's target. Coming to this square, Noah closed his eyes and took a deep breath of fresh air. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. Boom! Surging blue flames centered on the star pattern that suddenly appeared on Noah's chest. It suddenly burned and turned into a pitch-black knight's sword, falling into Noah's hand. Holding that knight's sword tightly, Noah raised it in front of him and pointed the tip of the sword forward, as if aiming at an invisible enemy. He began to concentrate. In the battle against the gods, Noah could only rely on the two weapons in his soul. Because, whether it was the god slayer or the god of disobedience, they both had an extremely foul physique. The nullification of magic. No. Not just magic. Spells, yin-yang spells, and so on, as long as they were used against the god slayer and the god of disobedience, they would all be nullified, even if they were beneficial spells such as healing and support. In other words, The magic and spells that Noah mastered could not be used against the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience, unless it was a magic that worked on himself like the enhancement magic. Otherwise, as long as it was used against the gods, it would be nullified. In this way, Noah's strength was equivalent to wasting more than half, and he could only rely on the two weapons in his soul and his own skills. This was quite a disadvantageous situation, and it also made Noah realize how foul the God Slayer and the God of Disobedience were. However, there was no turning back. Since he had decided, Noah would not go back on his words. If he wanted to obtain authority and become a God Slayer, he would not have the consciousness to risk his life. It was better to go home early, wash up, and sleep. What Noah could do was to race against time to strengthen the cards that he could use. At this time, a voice sounded from behind Noah. "Is that your sword?" Hearing this, Noah's hand movement stopped and looked behind him. He saw that Liliana, who was dressed in a blue and black formal dress, walked towards Noah with a proper posture, and a trace of curiosity appeared on her usually serious face. "Do you want to compete with me?" Chapter 468. Would you like to have a duel with me? While saying that, Liliana's eyes began to burn with passion. "I, Liliana Kranikar, request an audience with your sword, the Grand Knight of the Bronze Black Cross, whom even Minister Sarbatrii praised." At this moment, Liliana's voice was full of provocation, just like Erica's. From this provocation, Noah didn't sense any hostility, but her fighting spirit was awe-inspiring. Noah had heard this tone from Erica more than once in the past few days. And the reason why Erica used this tone was obvious to Noah even if he used his knees to guess. It was because only 2 people in the entire Italy had achieved the rank of a Grand Knight when they were still underage. Erica and Liliana were known as prodigies by the relevant people in the magic world. It wasn't difficult to understand why Erica would be so confident after achieving such an achievement when she was still underage. For such a talented prodigy, how could she easily admit that others were better than her? However, Noah's excellence was beyond doubt. Because he, as an ordinary human, blocked the power of a God Slayer. If Noah were an old man in his 70s or 80s, Erica and Liliana would definitely not mind Noah who had achieved such an achievement. Unfortunately, Noah was only a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. In terms of age, Noah was only 3 to 4 years older than Erica and Liliana. However, a person who was only 3 to 4 years older than them had achieved something that even the Holy Knights, who had the highest honor and rank, couldn't do, which stimulated Erica's and Liliana's self-confidence. Under such circumstances, it was only natural that Erica would constantly use a provocative tone to talk to Noah in an attempt to prove herself. At first, Noah thought that Liliana didn't care about this, but now it seemed that Liliana was just not as unscrupulous as Erica. She also had the intention to challenge Noah. In this regard, Noah just stared at Liliana's eyes that were full of fighting spirit. After a while, the corners of his mouth curled up. "Well, it's not a bad idea to treat it as a morning exercise. Then I won't stand on ceremony." Liliana's eyes flashed and she stretched out her hand in the direction of Noah. "My wings, the steel that forms the phantom blades. Silver Master Alchemist, bestow me strength." When such an incantation sounded, a glimmer of light emerged on Liliana's slender body and turned into a weapon that fell into her hand. It was a silver-white saber. Whoosh! With a sudden swing of the saber in her hand, Liliana assumed an attacking posture while her eyes were fixed on Noah. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise." Compared to Liliana's extremely ornamental posture, Noah just lightly raised that knight's sword in his hand and pointed it at Liliana. "Come on. You can attack at will." This sentence sounded like he was looking down on his opponent, but Liliana did not feel angry at all. Instead, her expression was solemn. It was not the first time that Liliana saw such a casual posture without tensing up his body. Italy's King of Swords was almost the same after drawing his sword. He did not assume any stance, just relaxed his body, and the right hand holding the sword drooped down casually. Anyone who had seen Salbar Dhoni's swordsmanship would know how frightening that seemingly unprofessional and belittling stance was. Because if there was no stance, it meant that any move could be derived. Dhoni did not need any offensive or defensive stance. His swordsmanship had already been completely integrated with his body. Even if he had lost all his memories, once he fought, that amazing swordsmanship could still be performed by relying on his body's memory. Therefore, Dhoni's stance was useful even when fighting against an extraordinary enemy like God. It was truly a realm where he did not need any moves to adapt to the situation. The East called this realm, having no moves is better than having moves. Liliana, who had seen this realm, saw that although Noah was not sloppy, he was more casual and relaxed than Dhoni. Naturally, all the vigilance in her heart exploded. Sure enough, in terms of swordsmanship, he's already comparable to Salbar Lay. Liliana's expression became more and more solemn, but the scorching heat in her eyes became more and more intense. However, this is what makes the challenge meaningful. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at Noah, who was casually standing in front of her. She slowly clenched the silver Grandmaster Craftsman sword in her hand, and a faint spell power quickly flowed on the surface of her body, giving Liliana a sense of tyrannical power. Hey dash! With a clear shout, Liliana tapped the ground with the tip of her toes and charged straight at Noah, who was close at hand. She slightly bent her wrist, and the blade of the military knife in her hand glowed with a cold light. When she was only half a meter away from Noah, she suddenly stopped and drew a tricky arc in front of Noah. Chi! Like a flash of silver light, Liliana's military knife turned into lightning and shot straight at Noah's direction. Looking at the incoming military knife, Noah just raised his hand unhurriedly and pointed the knight's sword in his hand. Ding! In the next moment, the tip of the pitch-black knight's sword accurately hit the tip of Liliana's military saber. With a crisp sound, the military saber was pushed back. Clang! The sudden force acting on the military knife made Liliana's body feel as if she was hit by something. She instantly retreated more than 10 steps, and after a while, she stopped her body awkwardly. Liliana's expression changed. She gritted her teeth and mixed some curse power with the military knife in her hand. Her body rushed toward Noah again. The military knife turned into a flash of silver light and suddenly stabbed out. Ding! Another crisp sound rang out. But this time, the tip of Liliana's military knife accurately pointed at the tip of the pitch-black knight's sword that Noah had not yet retracted. Perhaps, Liliana wanted to return an eye for an eye? However, Noah narrowed his eyes slightly. His hand that was holding the sword suddenly turned and retracted, pulling the knight's sword back. Then, something strange happened. Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman seemed to be directly attracted by Noah's knight's sword. As Noah retracted the knight's sword, Liliana and her sword were pulled over. Wadash! Liliana's heart skipped a beat. Her feet subconsciously gripped the ground, but her body still drew an arc in the air and crashed straight into Noah. Then, looking at Noah, who was getting closer and closer to her, Liliana's gaze turned cold. She simply gave up resisting and let her body crash into Noah's direction. The curse power in her body quickly condensed on her palm and quickly gathered on the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. If you can't resist, then attack. With a cold shout, Liliana's body turned and she fiercely tightened the military knife in her hand. Accompanied by a sharp wind-breaking sound, she fiercely slashed toward Noah's shoulder. Feeling the sharp wind coming toward him, Noah's hand tightened. The knight's sword suddenly slashed out like a meteor and once again accurately pointed at Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman. Ding! This time, it was on the blade of the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. A violent force gushed out along with Noah's stab, causing the tip of the knight's sword to ignite a spark on the blade of the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. An invisible repulsive force fiercely hit Liliana's silver Grandmaster Craftsman. After a moment of stalemate, it rushed toward Liliana's direction like a shock wave. Bang! Liliana only felt a huge force coming from the silver Grandmaster Craftsman. Her body was shocked by the repulsive force and she slid more than 10 meters on the ground, leaving a long shoe print on the ground. Ha! Ha! Liliana could not help but gasp. First, she glanced at Noah, who did not even move from his position, then she looked at her trembling hand that was holding the knife. Her eyes fluctuated. So strong. This person is so strong. Maybe, he can really, how is it? Noah raised his eyebrows. Still want to go? Hearing this, Liliana's expression became uncertain. In the end, she sighed and shook her head. I lost. Noah smiled. Chapter 469. Here. After buying the cold drinks from the small stall that had just been set up, Noah walked towards Liliana, who was sitting on the bench in the square, and passed one of the bottles to her. Although it's not a strenuous exercise, it's better to drink it. Hearing this, Liliana looked at the cold drink in front of her. After hesitating for a while, she nodded her head. Accepting gifts from others without any reason is not something that a knight should do. However, since it's done out of goodwill, it's a different story. I'll accept it with gratitude. After speaking like an honest and upright official in the face of a bribe, Liliana politely reached out her hand and took the cold drink in Noah's hand, while Noah was at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. Perhaps because she was too concerned about whether she should accept it or not, Liliana's hand accidentally touched Noah's hand. Eh. Suddenly, Liliana opened her eyes wide and blushed. She quickly retracted her hand. Seeing this, Noah tilted his head and asked curiously. What are you doing? No, nothing. Liliana replied loudly, giving Noah a shock. What's wrong with this girl all of a sudden? Little did he know that Liliana seemed to have thought of something and looked at Noah shyly. You. Could it be that you deliberately did this to me for this purpose? Huh? Noah was at a loss. What purpose? What do you mean? Just. Liliana seemed to be very nervous as she twisted her hand. She lowered her head and said shyly. To touch my hand, give me water, what? Liliana's voice was too soft. Noah frowned and subconsciously moved his head closer to her. Say that again? Looking at Noah's head that suddenly moved closer, Liliana shouted and jumped up. She pulled a distance away from Noah and pointed at Noah with a flushed face and shouted. What are you trying to do? The corner of Noah's mouth twitched as he looked at Liliana, whose beautiful face was flushed and her eyes were moist. However, she was looking at him warily. It was said that geniuses were generally weird. Could it be that Liliana was a typical example? If Noah knew that Liliana had such a series of reactions because she touched Noah's hand, he would be even more speechless. Was there a need to have such a strong reaction? Was it better to be pure? Or was it better to be too sensitive? Of course, Noah would never have imagined that Liliana would have such a reaction. It was all because she was too delusional. Although I don't know what's wrong with you, Noah rolled his eyes speechlessly. But, if you don't want to interact with me, then I'll go back. No, it's not like that. Liliana finally calmed down. While feeling ashamed of her excessive behavior just now, she pretended to be calm. I'm sorry, there was an accident just now. Please don't mind. After saying that, Liliana returned to her seat on the bench and sat down. She stared at the cold drink in Noah's hand and immediately reached out her hand to snatch the cold drink from him at lightning speed. I will accept your kindness. That's good. Noah really didn't know what to say. What was certain was that Liliana didn't seem to be as rigid as she looked on the surface. Instead, there was a very strange part of her. With a new understanding of Liliana, Noah sat down next to Liliana. Looking at the bustling street ahead, he asked very casually. You're up so early? Where's Miss Erica? Don't compare me with her. Liliana, who was still in the state of a young girl a second ago, was suddenly stimulated. She regained her usual solemn and awe-inspiring manner and even declared. Unlike those who lays in bed every day, as a knight, I have strict requirements for my work and rest schedule. Under normal circumstances, I won't change my work and rest schedule at will. I didn't know that Miss Erica would lays in bed. Noah curled his lips. Sometimes, I really feel that you two are indeed childhood sweethearts. His words made Liliana frown very obviously. She said in a very resistant manner. That's right. I don't understand why you think so. Isn't it? Noah replied. Both of you are known as prodigies in the magic world. But as knights, one is obviously willful and casual while the other is obviously strict and inflexible. From an extreme perspective, don't you feel that you two are compatible? Liliana's face instantly turned gloomy. If your childhood sweetheart invites you to watch a horror movie when you want to watch a movie, or happily eats desserts in front of you when you want to lose weight, you won't think so. He felt that the topic had become heavy all of a sudden. To what extent was this seductive female knight persecuted by that willful Miss Erica? At the thought of this, Noah could not help but feel pity for Liliana. He quickly laughed and drank his cold drink. Oh yeah, what was that sword move just now? Liliana seemed to have the intention to change the topic. Her expression became serious. That sword move that attracted my Grandmaster Silver Craftsman and pulled me over, was it some kind of magic? That's not magic. It's just a simple technique. Noah shrugged. The trick is in the control of strength. This is the application of using softness to overcome hardness and leveraging strength to counter strength. You should be able to understand. That sword move contains such a great mystery. Liliana looked at Noah blankly. After a while, she sighed. It seems that I still underestimated your ability. I've seen a sword skill that even Ching is inferior to. Noah Doria, you are indeed a person who is more talented than Ching in swordsmanship. Italy's king of swords was a rare genius who did not know anything other than swordsmanship. This was something that everyone knew. This king didn't know anything about magic, spells, or anything like that, but he had an extraordinary obsession with swords. If it was just a competition of swords, even if one didn't take into account power, it was impossible to find a match for him in the whole of Italy. In this aspect, being able to be comparable to the King of Swords meant that Noah's swordsmanship was unparalleled in the entire Italy and even the entire world. But if you want to kill a god, you can't do it with just strength. Liliana changed the topic. She looked straight at the gradually bustling street in front of her and said solemnly without looking back. Even if you can surpass Ching in swordsmanship, the second King of Swords is not so easy to be born. What's more, the god that appeared this time is the god of war who represents victory. It is also very likely that the king of gods of the Mediterranean Sea will be involved. Liliana turned her head and looked straight at Noah. Even so, you still think that you can succeed? Noah drank the cold drink silently. After drinking all the drink in the bottle, he threw it away casually. The empty bottle drew a perfect parabola in the air and fell accurately into a trash can. Perhaps, in your eyes, a guy like me who takes the initiative to challenge a god and even wants to kill a god is like an idiot who overestimates himself, right? Noah smiled indifferently. But, such an idiot, didn't the 6 god slayers whom you respect as kings used to be like that in the past? Liliana was speechless. Since it's not something that's absolutely impossible, it's still too early to make such a judgment. Noah turned his head and met Liliana's gaze. His dark and deep eyes were shining brightly. It's just like how you know that I'm stronger than you, but you still challenge me. I'm just exaggerating the same thing by a few levels. Regardless of whether I succeed or fail in the end, at least I have the confidence to keep my life. Since that's the case, why don't I challenge you once? Noah's dark and deep eyes stared at Noah closely. Looking at his face that was close at hand and listening to his somewhat handsome speech, Liliana felt her heart beating a little faster. Her pretty face blushed again. Rumble. At this moment, a shocking thunder suddenly sounded in the sky, startling Noah, Liliana, and everyone on the street. The originally clear sky was suddenly covered by a thick layer of clouds, becoming incomparably dark. Dazzling flashes of lightning flashed within, and the sound of thunder constantly rang out. Chapter 470. Rumble. The shocking sound of thunder continued to reverberate in the thick clouds. Thick bolts of lightning were like meteors colliding with each other. They flashed in the thick dark clouds and rolled back and forth, causing the sky to become extremely oppressive. The residents and tourists on the streets who thought that it was going to rain began to rush in the direction of their homes or hotels. Those who were setting up their stalls and preparing to make a fortune today were grumbling as they quickly packed up their stalls and walked away. Not long after, there were only a few passers-by and Noah and Liliana who didn't move at all in the square and the entire street. A man and a woman stood under the gloomy and cold sky, looking up at the scene where the sky that was clear not long ago suddenly became like the end of the world. Their expressions turned solemn. Noah Dole. Liliana's palms began to sweat unknowingly, but her voice was still as stern as ever. Do you feel it? At this level, if you still can't feel it, you can really go home, wash up, and sleep. Noah stared at the dark sky and narrowed his eyes. This is not a simple storm. There is an extremely large amount of cursed power gathering in the clouds. In other words, it was not a natural phenomenon, but a man-made phenomenon. No. It was impossible for an ordinary person to cause such a phenomenon that was thicker than a normal storm. Affecting the weather was not something that could be done by ordinary power. Therefore, whether it was Noah or Liliana, they could only think of one possibility. God. Liliana's eyes glowed with a faint light. I see it. It's God's power that is affecting the weather. Is it Welslana? Noah immediately asked. Does the ever-victorious god of war also have the power to cause such a phenomenon? The ancient Persian god of war, the god of victory, often incarnated into 10 forms in myths and traveled between heaven and the human world. Perhaps because the wind was getting stronger, Liliana began to raise her voice. Strong wind, bull, white horse, camel, mountain boar, young man, phoenix, shepherd, goat, and human warrior with a golden sword. There are a total of 10 incarnations, and each incarnation has a different power. Among these 10 incarnations, the goat incarnation can summon lightning and thunder. If this phenomenon was caused by Welslana, then now, the god of war should be using the goat incarnation. Liliana's face showed a hint of uneasiness as she said this. However, to be able to affect the weather to such an extent, without a certain degree of control over the sky, and there's the storm, this was beyond the reach of the power of Welslana's goat incarnation. Liliana didn't say it out loud, but Noah could understand it. Storm. Sky. Lightning. Noah said in a monotonous voice. It seems that we have to prepare for the appearance of another god. The moment he finished speaking, a surge of power that was more powerful than the power gathered in the sky rose from the direction of the seaside. Over there. Liliana pointed in the direction of the huge surge of cursed power and shouted. God is there. Even without Liliana's reminder, Noah could guess it. Noah had only seen such a large amount of power from himself and Tony. He had never seen a third person who could gather such a large amount of power. This level of cursed power could only be possessed by the god that appeared on this island. There was no other possibility for this level of cursed power. Lily. At this moment, a voice came from the direction of the hotel. Electra, who was dressed in a red and black outfit that was not far off from Liliana's, walked toward Noah and Liliana with a smile as fierce as a lion's on her face. It's time for the duel. Against the storm, Noah and Liliana were flying in the sky. They turned into 2 streams of light and flew toward the seaside. Noah used the death feather form of the magician. What Liliana used was a witch spell called flight. Erica, who could not use the witch spell, was in Liliana's arms. Unlike magic, witches were magic that could only be used by pure witches. While Liliana Kranikar was a knight, she was also a witch. In the world of magic, the title of witch had great significance. Erica was also a witch in a broad sense. To be more precise, she was a female magician who used magic. There was a difference between a pure magician and a witch. Erica was only a magician who could use magic, while Liliana was the last descendant of those witches and priestesses who became saintesses in the beginning of the era. Just like Aoizi and Yuju, one could only use magic, while the other had the bloodline of a witch. The difference naturally arose. The witch spell referred to the magic that only pure-blooded witches could use. The knowledge and magic that belonged to witches were passed down orally by Liliana from the previous generation of witches. Only Liliana, the last descendant of a witch, could use the spells. Under such circumstances, the three of them flew in the direction of the sea, braving the strong winds. In the next second, Noah, Erica, and Liliana saw it. They saw a giant. It was a giant with messy, fluffy hair and a beard that covered the lower half of his face. He looked rather wild and unruly, and was more than 20 meters tall. On the giant's body, muscles bulged constantly. Just by looking at him, one would feel that he was very bold. He wore rough clothes. His clothes were made of dirty rags and leather. However, not only did this appearance not give people a disheveled and dirty feeling, on the contrary, it could make people involuntarily feel a sense of majesty. Just looking at it would make people want to lower their heads and retreat in an extremely oppressive manner. On the other side of the giant, a 14 or 15-year-old boy, who was even smaller than an average adult, hovered in midair and confronted the giant fearlessly. The young man's clothes were not so much the clothes of this harbor street, but more like the clothes he wore in the oasis in the desert. He was dressed in ancient Roman attire. His jet-black hair reached his shoulders, and his skin was ivory. The young man was very good-looking, and his facial features were very regular. There was even a bit of a neutral feeling. He was a beautiful young man who couldn't be picked out at all. However, not only did this beautiful young man violate Newton's law and hover in midair, but his cloak also fluttered in the strong wind. His body also surged with an aura that wasn't any weaker than that of the giant. This told others that he wasn't an ordinary person who couldn't even truss up a chicken. The two figures, one big and one small, confronted each other in the ocean. The aura that gushed out of their bodies like a storm not only covered the entire ocean and sky, but also swept in all directions, shrouding Noah, Erica, and Liliana who were flying over. Almost at the same time, Noah, Erica, and Liliana came to a sudden halt and froze in midair. Under the shroud of the terrifying aura, Erica and Liliana were completely immobilized. Not only were their eyes and faces full of horror, but even their foreheads were dripping with cold sweat. These two prodigies didn't seem to have any experience facing the gods. Now that they had encountered the two gods of the highest level, the aura that leaked out was enough to awe the two genius girls on the spot. Noah was the only one who maintained his composure, but his expression was still solemn. He glanced at Erica and Liliana, took a deep breath, and suddenly spoke. "If you want to retreat, this is your last chance." Upon hearing that, Erica's and Liliana's pretty faces changed drastically. Humiliation, powerlessness, and anger at themselves. All kinds of emotions made these two talented girls bite their teeth and lips hard. Immediately, Erica said loudly, "I'm Erica Brantery." Liliana also spoke with a determined expression. "As a knight, I'm absolutely not allowed to abandon my companions and retreat." "Is that so?" Noah closed his eyes and suddenly opened them after a while. "Then, let's begin. To slay the gods." You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.